Does Google know where you are?
Google knows where I am.
Good.
So first order of business is to check to see if we have everything on the agenda. Mr. Schwartz, is there anything that needs to be added or changed?
No, there's not. Nothing can be added.
You couldn't possibly add any more, could you?
We jammed it.
191 pages worth. Good reading. That's great. Thank you. Any members of council have anything that needs to be dealt with tonight? We do have quorum. I'll just make sure everyone's aware of that. We have 4 the councillors here. And know that Councillor Hendricks is on his way. So then we're just going to launch right into the very first item, and that is our Centreville discussion. And Jonas, you'll start us off and introduce your guests.
Sure, yeah. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you very much. And I'm here to introduce the consulting team to report an update on the Centreville project. The Centreville project, there are 4 components to it. The first one is to update and review the current Central Area Redevelopment Plan. The second one is to review and update the French Village Design Guidelines to create and establish an economic development framework, and also the parking strategies. So without further delay, because we have a limited time, I will introduce Connie Gurley, the ISL project manager, to introduce her team.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. It's very opportunistic for us to meet with you at this time in the project process so that we can seek your direction and your comments on some of our draft deliverables. And we look forward to presenting an overview of the material that's already been provided to you for today's agenda. I think Johannes has covered in some of our agenda plan for today that there are 4 project components. I'd like to use my time with him having covered what they are to introduce the team leads for each of the project components. And if I could ask my team members to stand as I introduce them. Shauna Kuiper with ISL is the team lead for CARP and supported by Janusz Deshbonde from Green Space Alliance. And then for the design guidelines, Shafraz Kaba from Manask Isaac, and he'll be speaking to the guidelines. And then from the economic development strategy, we have Paul Blay from MDB Insight. And part of that economic development strategy does include the hotel demand study. And to speak to that today, we have Jason White joining us. Then the last component was the parking strategy, and the lead for that is Cam Matwee, supported by Dan Ziegler from ISL Engineering and Land Services. So that'll save some time for later. So thank you very much for this opportunity today. We have prepared the agenda that we had planned, and I know in the interest of time we'll try and keep this brief. After introducing and providing an overview of each component, having some key questions for your response. So we'll be very focused in those questions. As part of our agenda, we also hope to have some time at the end that we can come back to any further comments on any one of the 4 components. So we clearly are seeking your comments and your direction today in order to enable us to move forward in the project, finalize those deliverables, and then move to the next steps in the project. Our objectives are covered in the slide, and it's to get your feedback as well as suggested refinements, and you'll have a clear direction from the team leads as they present on what specifically we're seeking from you today. So without further ado, I'll invite Shauna and Janusz to come up and join me as we move to the first component, which is the Central Area Redevelopment Plan. You have to point it somewhere.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So I wanted to briefly overview the approach in terms of the Central Area Redevelopment Plan in terms of how we are approaching the update. There are 3 things that we are focusing on in addition to Council's strategic goals, and that's implementing higher order planning documents, the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan, which was finished in October 2016 and then later adopted by the province, and also your draft municipal development plan. These are documents that, especially the MDP, where a lot of effort has been put in by yourselves, and we want to reflect that, implement the policies relating to the CARP, as well as moving forward with some of the density requirements through the Metropolitan Region Growth Plan. We also want to build on previous work and recognize that work, the Downtown Urban Design Concept Plan, and we also want to facilitate implementation. That is something that we heard not only at the outset of the project, but also from the stakeholders that we've met with through our engagement activities, is that implementation is key. And so we want to make sure that we have a strong connection between all of the key documents. So making sure that the CARP itself, that's where the policy lies, that the design guidelines are indeed guidelines, and then the regulation in terms of regulating land use, that is within the land use bylaw. So part of our job is to provide recommendations to the land use bylaw project, and so we will be doing that as well. So just moving into the CARP itself, what we are using to guide the policy framework and the urban design framework for the document, or the update to the document rather, is 4 precincts within the Centreville area. Through our engagement work, we heard that there are distinct activity areas within Centreville itself, and we wanted to reflect that not only in policy, but also in urban design. So the 4 precincts, and Yanis shall be passing off to him very shortly, are the Civic and Recreation Precinct, the Residential Infill Precinct, a Downtown Precinct, and a Heritage and Cultural Precinct. And each of there'll be urban design. Our intent is to have urban design principles that relate to each of those precincts that speak to public realm, open space and connectivity, and also built form and land use. Yanis.
Thank you, Shauna, and good afternoon, everyone. The development scenario that we're going to present today, I just want to make sure that you understand that we had shared number of ideas with number of stakeholders in previous engagement events. So what you see today here is really the emerging themes that number of stakeholders have almost supported. So what you see on your screens here is 4 distinct precincts. One at the top, the blue one is Civic Recreational Precinct. The second one right in the center is the Downtown Core Precinct in red, and towards your right, the yellow precinct is the Residential Infill Precinct, and then we have Heritage and Cultural Precinct. So those are the 4 key distinct precincts, and I guess the purpose of taking this approach is it really helps basically your planning department, citizens and the development industry to understand the long-term vision and what the town wants to achieve. So it really helps in long-term economic development and decision making and branding, for your downtown. So just to take you through each precinct one by one and the key urban design principles for each. First, I would like to concentrate on the red precinct, which is the downtown core precinct. One of the key things that we heard was people really wanted to create, a central green space for cultural celebrations, and it kind of builds on what you have heard previously through the downtown urban design concept. So that concept came out really strongly. In order to create really vibrant downtowns, you also have to create smaller blocks. So what I mean by that is what you see here is these are small scale urban blocks. And to achieve that, you can create north, south, and east-west pedestrian connections, and those connections can be developed through public-private partnerships. So those roads that you see, they can be either public roads or private roads. Another thing that we heard was people really wanted to see this entire red area as predominantly mixed use. So it can be residential, office, commercial buildings, approximately 4-story high. At some corner locations, they can be 6 stories. But the whole intent was retail at the ground floor and residential above, and more accommodative kind of building uses. People also talked about strengthening, the 50th Street and 50th Avenue corridors as main streets, with a focus on retail. So that's really, like the key kind of like principles for the downtown core precinct. People also talked about like building on existing assets within, like what we call is a civic and recreational precinct. And if you're thinking really long term, you have like a regional recreational facility right there, and the town office and library uses. So if you can expand on that, you can really create a bigger, like civic, like institutional land uses in that area. The third precinct is the residential infill precinct, and that's where, like people talked about like small scale infill, such as like secondary suites, and some like medium density residential urban forms to the south, so that you can allow for like more residential uses within your downtown core. And the last precinct is, we called it, again, building on your existing asset, which is St. Vital Church, and responding to that, and how can we create, like people talked about creating a strong cultural destination, which is more like the town level cultural destination, so that you can really celebrate that heritage. So in a nutshell, these are the 4 different precincts, and that's kind of a long-term vision envisioned, like for the downtown. So what I have in, so this one, like really talks about like 4 distinct areas. The next slide, and it's not, yeah, I'm done. I'm almost done. So I guess the next slide here is like just explains, like if all these ideas are implemented in one of the scenarios, how the build form would look like. And this is not the only way, it can be implemented in multiple ways. But if all good urban design principles are implemented, this is how your downtown will look like. So what I also had, yeah, basically, I'm not going to go through like all these individual precincts, but basically, like the next 4 or 5 slides like really include kind of like just zoomed in versions of what exactly I just talked about, okay? So I won't go through that, but if you have any questions, we can use these slides later. I'm just going to stress on like one more point, is that one idea that came, which was you have your library and townhouse at this location. People also talked about like what would happen if we can relocate, like these institutional uses in your downtown, because that can provide a really interesting revitalization opportunity for your downtown core. That idea was, like brought up during consultation, and what it means is, like you have an existing like strip commercial site. So if you can, like swap land, like with that landowner, and they take like this land, like as a future long-term like commercial activity. So that was one of the idea that was discussed. So it could be, again, like we don't want to include that in our discussion here as part of the downtown plan, but that can be one of the long-term economic development possibilities. So I guess with that, I'm just going to pass it on over to Shauna.
Yeah. And so just in terms of the next steps and what we're going to be doing next in terms of phase 3 of the project, as I mentioned before, we want to have that strong connection between the CARP, the urban design guidelines, and the land use bylaw, because the land use bylaw is ultimately the implementation mechanism for this. So to do that, we want to make sure that we know and we have fleshed out very strongly in terms of what works best as policy, what works best as guidelines in terms of urban design, which Shafraz will be speaking to, and then also what works best as regulations within the bylaw. So we will be making that distinction, and we will be compiling a draft, complete document of the CARP. And as mentioned in the introduction, there's the 4 components of this project, and each stand on their own, but also I'll be taking a piece from each of the components to inform the CARP. So they will be informing the ARP overall, as well as they will be standing on their own to inform future discussions and future strategic priorities for council and administration. And also as an outcome, we will be making those recommendations to our zoning blueprint project in terms of the land use regulations. The direction that we're seeking from council today is one of given the branding of all of the long-term planning documents and other strategic documents within council, we are seeking direction in terms of the rebranding or the renaming of the CARP from the Central Area Redevelopment Plan to Centreville Area Redevelopment Plan. And then we're also, we want to know if we're on the right track. If you have any questions about the direction that we're headed, and also if you have any tweaks or refinements in terms of what we've presented today.
One other matter that we should bring to your attention is the work that we have been doing has contemplated a boundary adjust to expand the current boundary of the CARP, the existing CARP. So if we could just go back there briefly to show you the outline.
I don't know if I'm pointing it in the right.
Right here, yeah.
Right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, the yellow.
So do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
We do need your direction today on that to proceed with it.
So the current boundary, like this is in the south, like if you look, like over here, it's basically in this portion, the yellow area, and the current boundary is at that location. It includes this site, but so basically we are proposing to include these two urban blocks, the one block north of 50th Avenue and one block south of 50th Avenue. And this is right now, there's only like one building. So this is kind of a redevelopment opportunity, and this is part of the mature neighborhood.
We can come back to that, Madam Chair, if we could at the end of the presentations.
At the end of everything, or just this section? You want-
If it would be in the interest of time, unless people need more time to deliberate, we'd be happy to take your comments now, but I'm just mindful of time with the other
Okay.
components.
So I think we'll just open the floor for questions if there is,
Yes.
if there are any right now for this
Yes.
section. That's what you were hoping to do? Okay. Administration, we're just going to go right to council unless you have any comments. I have one for you later, so, okay. Anybody? Any questions, comments? And do you want to put the questions back up there? That would be helpful.
Where is the?
I think I'm aiming to the black box.
Oh, okay.
Am I in the way? Is that laser on my forehead? No.
I'm not having much success though.
Okay, members of council, question?
Sure, I'll start with one.
Councilman Kirk?
As I was going through this, and I like how it's broken up into precincts so you can organize your thoughts. One question I had on the, what is it, the recreational precinct? Is that what it was called?
Civic/recreation.
Yeah, is, and maybe for administration alongside yourselves, is how does that jive and work with our whole recreation master plan that we want to do as a community to forward look for not just Centreville, but other areas of town, specifically the annex lands. So kind of administration slash presenter.
Right, if I could start, I think that project got underway after this one had started, and that is, just as the land use bylaw project, a touchstone that we need to go back to before we finalize this concept to see if they're complementary. But the ideas that we reflect do come from the two stakeholder engagements that we've had and have been tested through community engagement too.
Yeah, I think, can I?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think you caught what I was going with. Like what I would probably not want to see is two things going down the road like this.
Two different visions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that the bigger look at the recreation master plan in town is going to be the bigger picture of everything, which would include this area as a piece. So,
That's right. And in addition to that, from the public realm perspective, it's looking at connections as well across the community.
yeah, I was going to go there too. So yeah, good.
Okay.
We'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. So the questions are on the screen. Would it help you if we stuck to the order of the questions, or are you okay with random thoughts here?
I think random thoughts, keying in on the boundary adjust and the renaming of the CARP.
Okay. So we'll keep going here. Councillor?
Sure. Thank you for the presentation, very detailed. Maybe a comment before a question. You'd made reference and you're trying to hurry the presenter along. I appreciate that. We've got a timeline here. You've done a lot of work on this, and this is a huge project for our community. So I wouldn't like to rush through, and maybe it's some advice for future presentations that are going to be coming up. We don't need to rush through because this is really important to us, right? So appreciate you guys understand it in and out, but skipping through slides and stuff like that, could potentially cause us to miss some stuff. So I definitely appreciate you trying to do it for us. I'll speak for myself. Don't be afraid to make sure we get the points, because you're here once. We'll be coming down the road, but point being, it's a really important project for us. We want to make sure that we've got an opportunity to hear and see it all. So thank you for trying to move the process forward. I'll answer the first question. I think it makes complete sense. The branding is very important. Centre-ville is something that is built on our history and heritage here in Beaumont, and I think it's going to be a key part to some of the other plans that we'll get into in a second. Park to me sounds like a fish, and so the Centre-ville ARP makes a lot of sense. It ties in, so I'll answer that question there, and I'll pass it on to others who have other questions. I do have quite a few comments, but we'll keep it.
We'll come back to you.
Yep.
Mayor Stewart?
Well, yeah, I got a couple, and forgive me if I'm jumping between this part and other parts because they're sort of interrelated. But yeah, I'm going to back up what Sam said. As much as we do want to move this thing along, we do need to give it the amount of time that it requires. So a couple things up in the recreational precinct. There's a transit hub being proposed for the Ken Nickel parking lot, which is great, right up until transit expands, and that parking lot is being, like when recreational activities are going on, that parking lot is packed. Like it's almost standing room only. So I'm not entirely sure that a transit center is a compatible use with a rink that's already done. Just one comment there. I'm okay with it being called Centre-ville, ARP, and I'm okay with the boundary expansion. A couple things in the middle. I noticed that we're calling for a park recreational square, and then the parking strategy calls for it to be parking. So some disconnects got to be sorted.
So,
Yep.
just a couple of comments. First, I'll talk about the transit hub, and I guess what we heard was like at that location, and this is a really like long-term, like 20-year vision. So if you really want to make sure that, your downtown really functions, like access to transit is extremely important. So like at that location, it can be a combination of transit plus parking. So, and when we are thinking about like long-term, it can be like there might be a parkade structure, you may go like multi-story. So this is really a long-term vision where, you have identified a designated like transit hub, which can then, people can get down at that location and then walk to your various downtown destinations. So that's how the vision is for the transit hub. Again, it has to be like flushed through, through the parking strategy and transit strategy and so forth. But right now it's just a long-term vision. The second comment again, again, if you're thinking about like really long-term and for the downtown core, if you end up, building, all these buildings around this central green, then probably, again, at that location, the parking, especially on the city lot, there is a possibility of like doing it like underground parking. So we're talking about a long-term vision here, so yeah.
We need to communicate that because that was not communicated in the document.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, yeah.
And I appreciate you're talking long-term vision, but your long-term vision and mine might be different. So,
yeah.
Question for clarification, Madam Chair, to committee member. Just long-term vision could be different. Is it based on the adequacy of parking provided to support the uses downtown?
correct.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Okay. I would like to ask a question, then I'll go back to you, Sam. So my question is just around the use of precinct, and just so if you could give me a little background on why we've chosen that particular structure. And I know they've used it in the city of Edmonton, and I kind of understand it. It's larger parcels and things like that. And some of the comments and the questions kind of lead me to think, is it meant to be restrictive, or is it just a helpful way to set up the policies? Like, what's the thinking behind that so that I can get my head around it?
Okay, I think we'll both have a go at it. Madam Chair, the precinct idea came up largely from the engagement activities and what we heard through the Charette 1 and 2. And that there were different activities, land use activities, as well as different feels. That's a bit arbitrary, but that's what we heard in terms of what people are participating in and what land use activities are occurring in those areas. And so it is a way to organize our policy document to also achieve certain objectives within those areas, and also have themes. So in terms of wayfinding or placemaking, that you know where you are based on the distinct land use activities or public realm activities that are happening in that area. Yeah.
And just to add on that, our intent, is to create a very user-friendly document so that it can be easily used by the planning department. Citizens can understand what the vision is, and the development industry can use it very effectively. So, for example, if someone wants to do a development in downtown core, they don't have to really read the entire say 50, 60 page downtown plan. All they can do is they can go to that precinct. In that precinct, there will be the vision for the precinct and the policies and implementation, so that they just read those sections and engage their architects and designers to design their project, and come to the city planners or the town planners, and it just becomes a very easy process in terms of implementation.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may suggest, just that we have other interrelated components, and would it be acceptable to committee that we would proceed to present those and then come back to general questions at the end, if that's acceptable?
Okay.
You'll have a more holistic view of the project.
That's fine by me, and thank you for the clarification. Is it okay with to move on, or you have a question that you need to ask now?
It's part of the 4 questions that were on the list.
I think they want to defer the presentation.
We don't want to omit questions. These were just for discussion to prompt thinking, so we don't have to sequentially go through each one. There were key pieces that we were seeking direction on for each component.
So I'd like to address a couple of questions.
Right now? Okay, go right ahead.
So with regards to the expansion, what does that mean to so there are residents who didn't used to be in the Centreville area and now that will be. What does it mean to them in terms of, if I'm owning a house and I'm in it and I'm out, what aside from a planning perspective, what does it mean to them?
Through you, Madam Chair, in terms of what it means is that there'll be additional land use policy that are applied to those lands that are not applied currently, and it will provide clear direction in terms of their redevelopment over the long term. We do, especially the block north, we have to consider the age of the current structures that are there, in terms of providing some redevelopment opportunity, but also recognizing nothing's going to happen tomorrow, so to speak. But just making sure that we have considered also through the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan that we are meeting the aspirational targets for redevelopment. And whether that means providing for secondary suites or for townhomes within certain areas if they meet certain requirements, and then the area to the south, given that it's largely undeveloped right now, it does provide some opportunity so that the town can meet those aspirational density targets.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one point. If there are owners who are not inclined to redevelop, there is nothing through the plan development that would say they need to do so until they're motivated and wanting to do so.
Right. And
so then just a
further
on that, in terms of the process, so you're asking us, do we think we should expand it? I'm assuming that just because we say yes here, it doesn't automatically, we're going to go through, there'll be, bylaw hearing, public hearing, that type of piece. Can you just clarify that?
Madam Chair, committee members, yes, that's correct. The due process would be followed. It would, if council was, committee members were inclined, in charrette 3 that's upcoming in the fall, we would then, in the material we take out, include the boundary adjust. That is not something that's been shared with stakeholders. We first wanted to get some direction from council committee on the matter. So that would be a way of testing that. And if there were concerns at that point, we could certainly bring that forward in the final.
Okay.
Okay. Could we carry on, or?
Yeah, I should answer the question. Do I have any concerns with it? No, I think it's a good idea, subject to all the engagement that needs to take place. So I think it's a good idea to go out and seek feedback from those residents that would be impacted. I did have one last point.
And Councillor Van Newkirk has some as well, so I just want to,
Sure.
We've got a couple more. Can we go back to him and then back to you?
No
Is that
problem at
okay?
all.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
I'm considering the next sections, and I don't know that this question falls into them. So one of the, I guess, charming features that's growing of our Centreville downtown is seeing people gather. And when you go to events, you see, as you drive by, you see people gather, you see people doing stuff, and then you want to be part of that. Hey, that looks fun. I'm going to park and go there. When I took a look back at this, and I was opening Google Maps and back and forth, one of the things I've noticed is the green, would you be able to go to the bigger map here?
Sure.
The green spaces where people would gather in this proposed outline, I guess you would say, you don't really see them from main areas where you drive. And, yes, connectivity plays in, and this is why I was kind of smiling when you said that, because you want to be able to see that alongside maintaining views. I've seen the red lines where, we want to maintain this view. There's some that we need to prioritize. Some may be subject to not being maintained based on development. So I guess the comment is that when some of the charm is seeing people gather, is making it a gathering spot. We've heard through Chambers, through the Transportation Master Plan, that traffic calming measures are the reason that we took 50th Street and made it skinnier, and residents don't like that whole bunch. But I understand why, and we've been through the conversations and we're there. So if we take another step to make it less traffic friendly, we want more foot traffic, but we can't see what we want to go join for a party and fun. I have a little bit of concern with that green space hidden out of sight from where you drive.
Through you, Madam Chair, to speak to that, and Janusz will jump in as well, it's just that what we've tried to do, I'll do the laser on this slide here, this, and Shafraz will speak to this probably as well, and just in terms of the parking, we've considered the parking hub here and having a very clear viewpoint into the gathering space as well. And then Janusz mentioned it before in terms of the north-south view corridors and the east-west ones as well. So we've tried to, as much as we can, incorporate views from 50th Street and from the Avenue, and making sure that they are there.
And just to build on that, the current green space that you see is really building on existing assets. Because the town owns that land, that becomes a very obvious location. We want to enhance the view corridors to that green space. Another major green space, which is although privately owned, the St. Vital Church property, that one was also identified by a number of stakeholders as almost town level cultural destination. So it may need a lot of partnership with that landowner to really make that happen. So that's a long route, but the possibility is right there, which has more access. And in addition to that, in the actual urban design guidelines, we'll talk about, these are the big open spaces, but there can also be smaller open spaces, which are pocket parks. They can happen at multiple locations. There can also be, a possibility of public-private partnerships where something smaller, pocket park happens on a private property. It's privately owned, but publicly accessible. So those kind of opportunities will be highlighted in the policy framework.
Thank you. Okay, to ask the last question on this part, then we'll go to the next presenter, okay?
Thank you. And this is probably my main point, and I'm glad you touched on it. When I looked at the plan, I felt two things. The town office piece is kind of outside. I'm certainly and I've looked at this a lot and through the engagement, all that sort of stuff, for two reasons. I'd like to see it somehow incorporated into more into the downtown core. From a realistic perspective, eventually we're going to need to expand this, and probably sooner rather than later. But I think that can kickstart, right? And you guys know this better than anyone, but that can kickstart the development. And so if we can throw that in there, I think that helps. But it also helps with the ambience around there. There is a lot of obviously employees and stuff that are here that if businesses that are looking to go around, then you've got X amount of employees that are within that tight network. I imagine people from the town office right now, they still walk down there, but it's a little bit further out. So I really thought to be able to, would like to see that in there. I don't know what that means, but when you mentioned land swap, I hadn't thought of that. That makes a lot of sense. So that would be a key change that I would like to see, would be to try and incorporate the town office, not necessarily the library. There's, again, to Councillor Van Newkirk's point, there's a larger strategy going on that, but definitely from a town office perspective, I think that could be an anchor tenant in that little plaza area. When I look at this, I think of the European cities, and I can see a really positive vision here. So yeah, that was more my comment I wanted to get across, is that feels kind of too far out there. So I'd like to see it in there, and I don't know what that does for your options, but that's something that I definitely feel passionately about, that we need to make sure that the town office, city office would be in that centralized area around that park area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't need to move like use all of these rods. We have big space on there. So you're doing that.
Guiding the speakers.
That works for you. Go ahead.
Carry on.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be able to give you an update and get some feedback at this point. So with the French Village Design Guidelines, we are working with a number of exercises in analysis and updating. And through that, we have looked at previous precedents, trying to find something similar to provide Beaumont with keeping its character, history, and identity. And for the urban design guidelines, we actually came up with 3 overarching principles to help guide our ideas going forward. The first is history and identity, the second is quality and durability, and the third is accessibility and adaptability. And these provide some of the framework that we take towards creating the building typology guidelines we would like developers and your constituents to follow through with. So we started off by doing a couple of charrettes, and what they are basically workshops with stakeholders, your citizens and other interested parties to come together and understand what is working and what is not. Charrette number 1 provided us with some very interesting findings in terms of what people really liked about living in this place, and what some of the challenges were and how we could address them. So everything from building scale to the color that was used in the developments to the very detailed things about the buildings themselves. One of the really interesting touch points we heard in these charrettes was we need to protect what little historic structures there are. And so we took that into consideration, and as our urban design guidelines develop, we will have some proposals for considering something like a facade improvement program or another mechanism to help keep your historic buildings sort of intact, or at least conserved for future generations. Another one we discovered when we did a walking tour during a charrette is you have some amazing view corridors that are connected by your trail network, mostly on the southern periphery. So there's these little glimpses out into the prairie that are really remarkable, that really speak to Beaumont and why people want to live here. There's actually some fantastic places where we could see how this can become a public parklet or something that can celebrate the history. You could imagine just a little didactic panel that says on this place, or this is sort of pointing out into the distance, do you see that sort of structure over there, what that history is and how to interpret it. Because one of the things we did discover in the charrette, there's not a lot of people who actually know the history. And I think that is really part of the heart of what we're trying to do, is reinforce what Beaumont is and why it is unique. Mentioned earlier, sort of the residential infill. What sort of characteristics must that have in order to actually become more relevant and more applicable to Beaumont? And what we too are suggesting is a rebrand from the French Village Design Guidelines to Beaumont Design Guidelines, because I think the feeling we had from the community we heard in the charrettes is, well, why is it? First of all, many of them didn't realize the history of this of the French village, almost mythology you have in this place, and many of them actually wanted us to look forward and to say, okay, that we've evolved and we are evolving, and we want to build on what is unique to Beaumont as a place. So with that, again, using those three overarching principles, we do value the history and identity that is rooted in Beaumont, but we feel and we feel the French character is already distinctive, but we want to make sure it speaks to Beaumont as it evolves for the next sort of century. So I guess what we're looking at to do next is test these urban design guidelines in charrette number 3, and we are going to be providing recommendations to the land use bylaw to try and make some of the more important density and walkability and livability, quality and durability aspects stand out a little bit more. So your planning department has the tools necessary to ensure you continue to get the good quality and durability moving forward. So basically, again, we're looking for input on whether or not we're on the right track, and if we are able to rebrand them to Beaumont Design Guidelines, and happy to take any comments and suggestions.
Look on this side of the table first to see if the mayor wants to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that's gone into these guidelines, and I had a quick scan of the draft document, and it's quite comprehensive. Couple of quick questions. One, are these the typologies and design guidelines being specifically focused on the downtown core, or
No.
are these expected to roll out to the entire municipality?
This is for the entire municipality.
Okay, so I got some comments on that then, because the feedback that I got all through the election and the feedback that I got all through talking to various business owners, and I don't know what you got back from them. Hopefully it matches. But the Frenchville Design Guidelines have been used as not a guideline, they've been used as rules, and people have been beat up with them, and so it just allowed any type of outside thinking, and so I don't want to see that happen.
Absolutely.
And I also want to, it's nice to have that friend, like the cities you use, Victoria, Conmore, they really focused on that down in their cores, which is really nice. Whereas as you got further out, there was provision for designs to become more modern and more accepting, and I'd like to see that ability happen and not always get stuck to every time we want to put up a townhouse that's got something like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the idea for us is to integrate our recommendations with the land use bylaw team to ensure that it has that flexibility. And also when we come to create the implementation strategy, what we're doing is trying to restructure the committee that reviews whether these guidelines are, implemented in the right way. So that committee will then be encouraged not to use them as rules, but as a document with flexibility. So that's how the next set will show up. We haven't written the implementation section yet, but I hope you'll see that next time.
One more from me.
Sure.
And the last comment that I had was mixed-use downtown core, and this may be anecdotal, but developers have been shying away from the complete retail residential on top everywhere. So I'd like to see them be able to have a mix of office buildings, residential, without having to comply with, it would, as much as it would be architecturally pleasing, it's not going to have a whole lot of flair if every building is the same. Like retail stores and apartments, it's going to. Maybe we want to, especially if we, as Councillor Moncott-Swain mentioned, if we want to meet town hall down there. I envision that being a 4-story office building, not retail.
Yeah. So that would fit in the civic institutional
Right.
typology.
So that mixed use really has to become mixed use. A multitude of facets, not just one form of it.
Good point.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Sure. You did write the word parking in this document, so I'm going to go there a little bit ahead of the parking conversation.
We don't follow rules really well.
Well, no, it's page 7.
Yeah.
There's a section on parking. It reads, parking and servicing areas should not be permitted in front of buildings. Private parking should not be required for new or expanded commercial development. Parking for new apartment buildings should be located at the rear of the building. Those statements, I understand why you put them there. They'll make the average Beaumont citizen completely cringe. We're a car society. People grapple with the reduced traffic flows that we have already. To mirror the mayor's comment, it will be very important to brand this as a visioning exercise moving forward. I'll reserve the rest of my parking comments for the parking section, but it's in here and I wanted to read those statements because they're powerful and people won't like hearing them. So
I understand. I think what we're trying to do with guidelines is to, again, create building typologies where that is required versus where that is encouraged. So there'll be a nuance in the wording of these guidelines where you'll have to see required versus encouraged versus, allowable versus, not allowable. So they're definitely on 50th Street. It does not make sense to have parking in front of the building, obviously, right? You want to maintain that street frontage and the pedestrian nature of it. There is one corner that does have parking in front of the building, but that's sort of the sort of the exception to that rule. But these are basically based on sort of evidence-based planning principles that we're trying to reinforce the character of that street being the main street. And like I said, other districts, other precincts will allow them to have parking in front of, given the nature of that street. But we will be very particular on that.
yeah, I think that comes across when you flip through this document with the photos and stuff. Like you paint the picture in here.
Exactly.
It's just when those words aren't located beside these photos, it's going to get tough, right?
Exactly. And that's what we need to add to this document, a lot more illustrations of like, here's where it's, here's a good example, and this is a work in progress. So I will definitely ensure we have more illustrations of that nature.
Thank you. Councillor Sam.
Thank you. Just to build off two things that came up there. One was around the engagement. First comment I'll make is that people I've talked to that have been involved in the process have really appreciated it. I think it's It's been easy to understand that they've gone through the process. The other comment that is, it's always been, it's a very high level plan, a concept, but these things tend to go from very high level to boom, here's a document. And that's tough for people to wrap their head around when, so I guess more of a challenge or a request is we've really got to ensure that there are other photos and all that sort of stuff, because you're going to provide a 150-page document. People aren't going to read it, right? So
Right.
You guys know what you're doing there. I just wanted to make the observation that, and you commented on it just before that, we're up here, right? But soon it comes boom, and then it's up here, and then all of a sudden decisions being made. I like kind of the vision, but I didn't really get a chance. So that was just more of a comment. I did want to also touch on the parking. Personally, I'm not as concerned around the parking. I really see, I'll speak for myself, I really see myself in this plan and the vision, the walkability, again, talking about walking around Europe and all that stuff. I can see what we're trying to do here, and so I'm not as concerned. I'm not saying that you are, Councillor Van Newkirk, but I'm not that concerned about the parking. I will get to it in a second, but I really think that promoting walkability is key in order for people to come down here and stay here, as opposed to just parking, going into one store and getting out. And that's why I like being outside and forcing people to walk around. So I really appreciate that. I did want to touch on the specifics, and the mayor asked a question kind of alongside it, but the comment was very, very prevalent in the election about what do you think about the French village guidelines. So maybe I'll ask the question. Definitely change it to Beaumont, thank you. But to my question, I think there is the perception that the French village guidelines cost more money to develop the building, and that gets cast down to the business owner, who obviously gets passed down to the retailer. So a comment on have you seen, in your experience, do you find that these guidelines could potentially that could be a result of the high lease rates in town? So that's the first question, is do you see these guidelines contributing to the high lease rates in town? So maybe I'll leave it there, and then I'll go to follow up.
Well, just to speak to that, it kind of comes back to the idea of guideline versus rules, and it comes down to the implementation strategy we put forward for a new review committee to have a look at how a proposed development fits or doesn't fit these guidelines. And I guess the challenge will be is to make the implementation book very clear of what is expected, and speaks to the overarching principles that I mentioned earlier, right? Does it have quality and durability? Does it have accessibility and adaptability, right? And does it, not necessarily every single building needs to speak to history and identity, but if it hits 2 out of the 3, then it kind of passes that test of being valid for the proposal, right? So that's what we need to do.
Yeah, so fair, I get that, but didn't quite answer the question. And if you don't know, that's fine. But
if it's going to be more expensive,
and I get this balance, because you get the durability and those are benefits, right? But just in your experience and what you're seeing around, when you looked at the studies, have these guidelines that are in place now?
The previous ones, yes, because it mandates mansard roofs or very steep pitched roofs. Those increase volume of a building. Volume increases material costs. So yes, absolutely, it does increase cost. So now that said, our new version of this creating building typologies, we are being far more flexible on roof form. So we say you can do a steep pitched roof, but you can also do a flat roof, provided you provide other measures that make it interesting.
Did you need to say something?
No,
Okay, you just came up in case we needed users?
Moral support.
Yeah, just I guess further to that, with the French Village design guidelines, we do have Part A right now, which is applicable to Centreville, and then they're a little bit looser as you go beyond Centreville. So Centreville does prescribe those large roof pitches. They're not usable space, they're just add-on construction. That is an added-on cost. Also, the review of these, the guidelines and whatnot, they're not entirely clear as to what is actually being looked for. So they're implemented through our land use bylaw. That's how they do become a rule. That's how these guidelines are enforced. So that's where we've come up against there being red tape. We are definitely aware of that. We've heard that ourselves. We're trying to make it easier for builders to actually get these buildings constructed. But at the same point in time, recognizing the investment that people have already put in to creating some of these beautiful buildings we have.
If I may, on the same topic, I'm concerned about losing what we have and not building on that theme, because I think it does sell in terms of bringing people to our community, as well as an attraction, as well as it looks good. I know I'm a bit at odds with these two councils for sure, and I can feel it coming. But honestly, I don't know who participated in the charrettes and whether you heard from the very few dissenting voices that are out there, but I know they're out there, who will say, don't lose our history and our heritage, and don't lose sight of it. So I want to fall somewhere within the extremes of this, because I'm not all or nothing, and I understand there's a cost, and it might have gone too far, but I'd like to see it not lost entirely. And for that, I guess I'm thinking, can you build something in that ensures that we still will have recognition? And I guess I want to pick up a word somebody said, I can't remember who, mythology, the French mythology?
Yeah.
It's not a myth. There's heritage here.
True,
and I have to say that, who's ever listening on Facebook or wherever, but I know this is not a myth. And I'm not born and bred here. I came later on in my life, but there is a heritage here, and I don't want to lose that. I think it's important to keep it, not at the expense of business. So somewhere in the middle is where I'd like to be, and not on the extreme where you have to follow these rules, and regardless of the expense, nor do I think we throw it all away.
So the charrette number 3 will be testing our typologies and our guidelines. And one of the tests will be to show how the civic institutional typology actually requires far more stringent adherence to French character. So because your town hall has a green, very particular roof, it has dormer windows, it has all of the characteristics that we value, your library, your other municipal buildings. So that is where we will reinforce and require, not encourage, but actually require that sort of character and history to retain that aspect. And that's sort of the balancing act, because we know the civic institutions need to actually speak to what Beaumont is, whereas private developers can take more of a bigger leap, or even a translation of those ideas in a different way. So that's where the flexibility is.
Not to lose it.
Not to lose it, but
That's my
to build
message.
it. Yeah.
Councillor McGough-Swain, and then I'll go to Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you. Just to follow, I'm certainly not at odds to this at all. In fact, I didn't know much about it, and then we have some very smart people in our planning department who put me straight on a lot of the reasons and the vision behind it. And I'm a huge supporter of these design guidelines. I think it adds a great character. I'm certainly supportive. I hope my question wasn't leading you to think that I didn't support it. It was just, I know it's a question that's out there, and now I've got the answer, so thank you. So I am very supportive of this. My follow-up question was regarding the Centreville, and we talked a little bit about before when Ms. Raymond commented, that kind of relax the guidelines as we go out. So first, I'll ask a really quick question first. So in the business park, I understood that, so south of 625, I understood that we're probably not going to restrict or put those guidelines in there. Is that?
Well, that's still part of the Beaumont municipality. Okay. So the guidelines are applicable. How they're interpreted through the implementation will be more flexible.
Okay. So then the comment was, and without, again, any background in this sort of stuff, my general thinking was, I like it in the Centreville, but as we kind of head further out,
Yeah.
why do we even need it at all? And then again, the smart people in our planning group said, well, and so I'm interested in your comments on it, whether it was if you relax it out there and it's easier, cheaper, more affordable build out there, then what happens to your downtown quality potentially? So just along that thinking, it made sense to me, but just curious on your thoughts on if we just limited it to just the Centreville piece.
Well, then I think that becomes a disincentive to build in Centreville. And I think that creates an unfair sort of mechanism then. And it gets taken out of context and it doesn't quite work the way I think we've seen it work, again, through our precedent studies and how other municipalities have implemented these types of guidelines. It has to be all-encompassing, but with various degrees of flexibility, or various degrees of, okay, this is required in these areas, these are encouraged. Like, there's some very nuanced words in guideline writing, and this is actually going to be the balancing act between our recommendations to land use bylaw, where it is enforced. So that to me is actually where we're going to have some interesting discussion, because we're putting out these recommendations and we hope some of them will be instituted in the land use bylaw to help push a little harder where we want to see French character, especially in Centreville, in the core, especially in some of the districts that we're establishing.
Yep. Thank you.
Ms. Mohammed, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to touch on a couple of things. The first being that the French Village Design Guidelines alone are not the only factor that leads to higher lease rates within Beaumont. It can start from the very raw land. It could be how much commercial is available at the time. All sorts of different factors go into that and can't solely be placed on design guidelines. The other thing that I just want to highlight is very common for all municipalities to have design guidelines in place based on different precincts in their municipalities. We just happen to call them French Village Design Guidelines, but most urban municipalities have design guidelines that developers must adhere to. Something else to think about with these design guidelines and putting these in place across the whole municipality, when you come, like they establish your sense of place. So if you were only to put them in the center of Beaumont, then you're hoping people come to the center to notice that they're somewhere different. But if you extend them out to the whole municipality, then as people come in, they go, oh, I'm in something a little different than what I'm used to seeing. Because if you don't do that, then you'll get the regular boxes that you get in every other municipality in North America. And this is what helps to delineate Beaumont as somewhere a little different, offers something a little more special in terms of character and feel and sense of place.
Thank you for that, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. And I just a time check. It's 6 o'clock, and we still have 2 more presenters. Okay.
I've got quite a few bullet points of questions here. I'm going to combine a couple. Topic is evolution. Subjects are signage, lighting, and street furniture. So it's going to take time to get there. We have signage, we have lighting, we have street furniture now. We have ongoing development in town. We have evolution, and we have where we want to be. So in between here and there is a long period of time. We've talked about that. A lot happens. But there's a lot of exceptions, grandfathering, but what about me? I was here, now I'm there. Presentation, do I really have to be there? Okay, we don't or we do. You know, there's a lot of room for interpretation and change between here and there. So how, through the evolution of those things, being signage, lighting, street furniture, do we end up where we want to be? Right now we have backwards benches. We have signage bylaws that are enforced and not, and new signs and old signs and all in between, and we're well aware of that. We've talked a lot about it. It's being addressed in the upcoming documents. But then we have lighting, and I think we can improve on our lighting and make it way more pretty and cool. And you know, I think that's an area we can probably improve on in the real quick term. But I guess just maybe speak to that evolution and you know, what helps you get there and be consistent at the end of 20 years, 30 years.
Well, I guess you have to look at it as evolution. So as things wear out and as things get replaced, we are hoping your administration will use what we have developed to determine what will work and what, for example, street furniture is going to be the city standard. Like we, in our first cut at this, we are recommending that 50th Street remain intact for the types of street furniture to carry forward and not change that, because it's actually like there's no point to change it now, right? There's already sort of a very particular type of lamp standard, a bench. It might not be placed the right way, I understand, but it might. But the actual aspects of those are good, and we want to encourage that. We want to then make sure it creates a level of quality that is reinforced elsewhere in Beaumont, and that's sort of why we speak to sort of the durability and quality aspects. We'll say, yeah, so a different precinct or a different district could actually do something similar, but make sure it's not reduced in its quality. And as it gets replaced, hopefully, again, your administration will maintain the integrity of carrying it forward.
Just a follow-up to answer the question, and that kind of leads me into why, that's why I support the Beaumont design guidelines.
Right.
And the bigger picture, subsequent to what you said is, you drive in, you see something different, and, you see a consistent light pole, you see a consistent garbage can look or whatever, and that starts to define the, Beaumont proper as you go, and, that's why I would support the design guidelines. I do think we're on the right track. I have a couple of big picture questions that I don't know when to say them, now or later.
No, I think we'll go through another presentation yet.
Okay.
Okay, you move on to the next one then?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of committee. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Paul Blay with MDB Insight, Jason White with HVS. We're here to speak to the economic development framework, and Jason will speak after me specifically to the hotel feasibility study. The first thing I want you to know is that when we developed the economic development framework, we did not do it in isolation. We took a lot of things into consideration. The blue boxes on the left-hand side indicate the types of analysis that we've done as part of the project. We looked at the demographic and economic indicators of the community. We conducted a gap analysis to see where the retail gaps are in Beaumont. We looked at the competitiveness of the light industrial marketplace, and we did a number of other types of outreach to the community, participated in the charrettes and our own our own workshop with the business community. That led to a strengths, opportunities, aspirations, results assessment, and led us to making some recommendations around investment readiness and attraction and business retention and expansion, both of which are critical components to an economic development service that a municipality provides. Business retention, focusing on the existing business community and what you have here, and investment attraction, looking at new opportunities. The check marks are slightly off here, but it's not a big deal. You can just kind of move them up a little bit to get them in the right row. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The ones on the bottom are trying to escape, but they can't quite get out. So our report has 5 strategic recommendations, which you see on the left-hand side, and the purpose of this matrix is to show you that they line up with the aspirations of the community. The aspirations are those things that were identified through the public engagement and through some of the other methods of communication. And you can see that the strategic objectives align with the aspirations. So we feel really comfortable with bringing these forward to you because they are consistent with what the community would like to see happen with Beaumont. So getting right into the objectives, right from the RFP to communications with the administration, they're very clear that they didn't want the economic development strategy just to be high-level discussion. They wanted it to be tactical. They wanted it to be action-oriented, and I hope that we delivered on that front. There are 13 pages out of the document that are dedicated specifically to the action plan, identifying not only the strategic objectives, but the activities within them, the partners that are required, and the types of performance metrics or benchmarks that could be helpful in evaluating performance. These bullet points under the objectives are really meant to identify the outcomes. So the first objective, build a smooth, transparent, and client-centered development process. The outcomes of that would be businesses can plan more confidently, and there's already been discussion here this afternoon about challenges that the business community may have faced in realizing their visions. Reduced ambiguity and streamlined applications approvals, plus improved investor satisfaction. Increased transparency results in increased trust. Specifically, what we recommend are things like a pre-consultation process with developers. We recommend a concierge service where you have essentially an account manager that works with developers. This can be applied to existing developers too, or existing businesses too, who are looking at moving or expanding their operations. It's not exclusive to those special people that are coming in for the first time. And what we emphasize in the action plan is that you can brand this. You can turn this into a competitive advantage. So it might not be a financial incentive per se to come and invest in Beaumont, but it's an indirect financial incentive, because with a faster, more confident building approvals process, a business can move through at the speed that they're comfortable with. There's no mix, there's no ambiguity, there's essentially no trouble in getting to their end goals, which, if time means money, that means money to them. And Beaumont can differentiate itself amongst a really crowded, competitive environment in the Edmonton metro area. Strategic Objective 2, prepare long-range planning and servicing strategies and enhance site selection tools. This is all about improving the product that you have. In some cases, you're not really investment ready. You're not investment ready when it comes to light industrial development. You've identified some lands, but you need to complete some ASPs. You need to move towards having servicing. You need to be closer for businesses to take you more seriously. Obviously, most businesses won't have the patience to wait 3 years or so at this point. So our recommendations in some cases really push you towards product development and say, you know, as fun as it is to get out there to the rest of the world and tell them how great you are, you're probably not best spent. Your time is not best spent at this point in time doing that when it comes to the light industrial lands. Whoops, didn't want to go forward. Strategic Objective 3, initiate targeted investment attraction activities. So where you are ready, around the commercial development, for instance. And this part of the project is a little different than most of the other parts, other aspects of the project, in that we were asked to look at the entire municipality, not just Centre-ville, but the entire municipality. But when it comes to Centre-ville, we tried to improve upon the 2011 niche market study, which was quite general in scope, and we gave you some very specific commercial targets that we think fit well with the discussion, based on the discussions we had and based on how the project team is moving forward with design guidelines, with the other aspects of this, with the CARP and with other aspects of the strategy. So upscale dining, entertainment, locally designed and made goods, all of these things will extend the different look that you have to a different feel, because people will be participating in a shopping or an entertainment experience that hopefully they won't be able to find anywhere else. Strategic Objective 4 is initiate a robust business retention and expansion program. I'm fully aware in speaking with Rob that you're doing some business walks, you're meeting individual business people and letting them know that it's great to have their investment in the community, which is fantastic. That's what in its basic nature, a business retention expansion program is all about. You want to find out what's hurting an individual business or what opportunities they haven't been able to take advantage of, and then have town staff be able to maybe move them along, help them out in their challenges or opportunities. And secondly, if you collect enough information about what's going on amongst individual business owners, you know generally what you need to do to improve the entire business environment, so that when new investors are coming in, they see that things have been taken care of. And lastly, Strategic Objective 5, support home-based businesses and small enterprises. You have a disproportionate number of small business people, which is a great thing. It means a diversified economy, essentially. It means that, and this is something we suggest that you encourage more of. You have business people working in town, so they're more likely to shop in town. They're more likely to participate in the civic aspects of life and volunteer in the communities, which is really above all an important part of community development strategy. So those are the 5 strategic objectives. I'm going to hand it over to Jason, who's going to speak very specifically to the hotel demand study.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I undertook the hotel demand study, and as a part of those objectives, the first one was to evaluate potential hotel sites in Beaumont, and these were provided by Beaumont to evaluate. From there, we went and sought to understand the current hotel market, evaluating here Beaumont, recognizing there isn't a hotel at this point. Also taking a look at the greater Edmonton area and communities surrounding Beaumont for that. From there, we determined the most appropriate type of hotel or type of hotel development for Beaumont, and then ultimately determined the economic feasibility of a hotel in Beaumont. So, thank you. All right, for the hotel site analysis, we took a look at 3 areas within Beaumont. First was the north area, second was the Centreville area, and then the south area. We concluded that at this point, the north is the most suitable for the development of a hotel. Contributing reasons for that, the price of the land, the size of available vacant sites, as well as it's currently proximate to services, restaurants, other shops. So from a hotel market overview, as I mentioned, since there is currently no hotel here in Beaumont, we evaluated the greater Edmonton area. Within the report, we did narrow that down to Nisku and Leduc, as well as Edmonton South. This chart that you see right here is for the greater Edmonton area, otherwise we'd be here all night talking about hotel stats. So for greater Edmonton, you can see the blue line, that is the occupancy rate, so the actual percent of the occupied rooms. The light blue bars, those are the average daily rate. And then the green bar, that is revenue per available room. We refer to it as RevPAR in the hotel industry. Essentially, RevPAR is your occupancy rate times the average rate. So you can see the trend. We went all the way back to 2005. We saw a peak in 2008 prior to the global recession. Then we saw some really strong growth up until 2014. You saw occupancy rates gain up to 70%, which is really healthy, and you saw some strong growth in average rates during that time as well. With the collapse of the price of oil, we saw a decline in the amount of travel associated with the energy sector. But combined with that, and this is important, is that a bunch of hotel developers got new projects underway prior to that, planning on, oil's going to stay above $100 forever. So as a result, there's been a significant amount of new supply in the area as well. So you see that occupancy rate ending 2017 at its lowest point in the period shown. how the hotel operators chose to respond to that is you have increased competition, they started cutting their rates. So that just hurt revenue performance as well. In terms of operating costs, those didn't go down. In terms of the cost of building a hotel or the price of land, those haven't gone down. So it put us in a very difficult environment, not only in the greater Edmonton area, but in Alberta and Saskatchewan as a whole. All of these areas have very similar trends since 2014, where you've had a decline in demand or demand staying flat, a significant increase in supply, and declining rates that they're charging. All right. So hotel product type and feasibility conclusion. Our conclusion in terms of the most appropriate type of hotel development in Beaumont is a branded limited service hotel. This type of development would bring the highest return to a developer within Beaumont. Why branded? The reason why branded is hotel projects are very hard to finance at the best of times. If you don't have a brand, it's even more difficult to get the bank to provide mortgage financing on that. They like the security, they like to check the box of it's affiliated with so-and-so brand. Why limited service is the most efficient type of hotel operation. You don't have a significant amount of meeting space, which is traditionally underutilized relative to your guest rooms, as well as it doesn't require as many staff members. In terms of the cost of construction of a limited service hotel, it is also the lowest point. You can typically do wood frame construction on this. Once you get into more of the higher end hotels, you have to switch to concrete construction, which significantly increases that. We monitor hotel transactions and hotel developments, not only in Canada, but throughout North America. Specifically in Canada, you're seeing the return on equity requirements for a hotel developer ranges between about 12.7% to 23.8%, with an average of 19.7%. I'm not going to get into all the math underlying on those, but it provides you with a range of what the market's typically expecting for hotel development today. Based on this most productive or the highest return, a limited service hotel, we estimate that that's around 11.7% return if it were to be developed today. So based on all those parameters, evaluating the overall market, evaluating the development community and whatnot, at this point we do not consider a hotel development to be economically feasible with Beaumont at this time. So with that, we did want to, there's options to encourage hotel development within a town, and we've done a number of feasibility studies throughout Canada and throughout the States, and we've seen different programs that could help enhance the return to a private hotel investor. And the first one is offering property tax incentives, which lowers the operating costs. As soon as you eliminate some operating costs, it flows directly to the bottom line, which increases the return to the developer. We have seen this. I've experienced it throughout Western Canada. One recent one where we've seen the hotel come to fruition is Oliver, BC. The hotel just recently opened over the last couple of months. Contributing the land for the hotel development to lower the development cost. Obviously, if they get the land for free, then that's not a cost that they incur and enhances their return. And then the other side of that is obviously that's a tax burden on the population. So all of those are obviously considerations in that. Waiving applicable development fees to lower the development cost, and then guaranteeing a certain amount of business for the hotel to diminish operating risks. So if a developer approaches you, you could say, with Beaumont, we have this many people visiting the town, and we guarantee that they will be staying with you when they're coming to do business within Beaumont. And from that, we will go to discussion questions.
Thank you very much. Would you like to jump in on this one first? Ready, Steve?
Sure.
Okay.
I've got 5 points on the section. I guess I'll start at the top. One of the comments that I found intriguing in there mirrored exactly what I've seen and heard around housing availability, cost, whatever. I didn't really hit on it you didn't hit on it in the presentation, but it's in here. The outflow of young and aging due to absent housing inventory and or price ranges for young, styles, quality, and services required for aging. So, you know, when you're getting your first house, Beaumont's tough to get your first house in. When you're moving out of your two-story and you want to go into a condo or you want to go into an increased service thing, you're going to one of the developments tailored for that in Edmonton. Local people don't necessarily want to live. They want to be able to have that here. So I think that, you know, the fact that you outlined that and pointed that out, I just, you know, I'm offering that as a comment, as an important thing to build upon and think about as we move forward. So that's that comment there. I got 2 more comments, so I can make them quick.
Go ahead, quick so the operative word.
Page 10, 2.4.1 hits the nail on the head for our economic development, and that was around the fact that we have some land, but we don't have, it's not available and we don't have plans for it, and which is limiting industrial development. I know our economic development guys are doing a land inventory, and that's an important part of that, but I think it's important as part of this conversation to identify that it's a serious gap in what we're doing at all moving forward if we have nothing to sell. And that's where we're currently at, and I know there's a couple pieces to that. Last comment is very quick. Retail leakage. I wrote, sure, but what does our current population support? You know, when we talk about retail leakage, we know that people are going other places to work every day. And we know that there's leakage. And, you know, maybe it's a bike store, this store, that store, a different service, but for sure. But what does a population of this size support? So that's my only question.
Thank you.
3 good points, 1 question. Okay. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor. The gap analysis that we conducted included a theoretical capacity of the municipality. So based on the population of Beaumont, you should have X number of this type of retail. And that in a sense is, you know, the way that we identified, generally speaking, whether there was underrepresentation. So if you had fewer than the theoretical number, then that's an underrepresentation, speaks to a gap or an opportunity perhaps. And we identify a few of those, and some of them we caution against. I can't think of one specifically, but we would say that, you know, there's a gap here, but be aware of online retail, be aware of the new developments of the premium outlets that can take that gap and essentially eliminate it as an opportunity. Where there's and then sometimes we actually we do pounce on the gap and say it looks like that is really strongly in line with an opportunity. The restaurant, full service restaurants, is a good example of that one. On the other side, if there's a theoretical overrepresentation based on theoretical, that is a caution to say you may not be in a position to get any more of that, but it could mean that you have a bit of a cluster around that, and you may be able to leverage that and actually attract more of that type of retail because shoppers come to see more. You don't have it in your community, but the one that comes to mind is, you know, the auto malls, right? Wetaskiwin or whatever. You know, people destination shop for vehicles, right? And so having a road with 8 different retailers of automobiles, that's a draw in itself. I'm sorry, just one's escaping me that I could bridge off of for Beaumont, but that's the kind of thinking behind that. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, okay. I read through it and I kind of understood it, but it's hard. The way it's presented is a bunch of numbers. Top of the list is auto services, parts stores, whatever else. Anyone who tries to get something fixed in this town knows that. Right?
Yeah.
So, but
okay.
You could say it more eloquently.
All right.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Councillor Mulgrave Swain.
Thank you. I have 5 comments and 2 questions.
And we have 15 minutes. We're stopping for pizza. Did I tell you that?
Okay, I got no comments or questions. No. First, I just want to thank you for the work that was put into this. Off the top, you said, you know, we really wanted to deliver on something tactical, and that was something that when we had a previous kind of conversation around this, I left there feeling it was a very high level, pie in the sky
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah.
What you got here, you absolutely delivered on the technical. In fact, I liked it so much I read it twice, so thank you.
Thank you.
I also think that we're asking a lot of administrations, a lot of recommendations there. Rob and beauty, but there's a lot of work there, and so I'm expecting some budget conversations to come up, and I hope that council acknowledges the fact that if we want to deliver on these recommendations, we've got to provide you the resources to do that. So that's my second comment. The other a word that really resonated with me as I read it was that it was very realistic, and I think around town this 80-20 thing is a buzzword. I've got another buzzword coming up, but there's 80-20, and during the campaign everyone said, oh, we're going to change 80-20, and that's certainly something we need to strive for, but I really appreciated how it was very realistic, particularly on the light industrial piece, and that is a long-term vision. There's nothing that 7 of us plus administration or any report can do that can get that ready any sooner. We certainly got to work towards it, but I think it's important for, I'll speak for myself, that when we're engaging on these topics about 80-20, that we got to be realistic on it, and I really thought you didn't try and oversell it, and so I really appreciated that. Comment around the sorry, we'll get into my questions here then. One of them was around the timing. And so if we look at, I'll just go to page 14 and, sorry, 114 and bring it up. So the strategic objective number 3, initiate targeted investment attraction activities. You've got timing as medium term. I think personally out of the 5, that would be something that we'd need to kind of spend a bit more emphasis on. So I'd encourage you to take a look at some of those things to, attracting more fine dining, that sort of thing. And then you've also got a track developer for a medical population, professional services, office space. I'd like to see a bit more emphasis on that, just as a comment there. So now I will ask my question.
Yeah, okay. I was waiting for the question mark at the end of that one. Don't you think?
No, yeah. Question, I guess it's not really a question here. So it's around the hotel. So I thought these were questions and more comments.
It's okay,
around the
okay.
hotel.
Comments are good.
Again, another buzzword around town, and a lot of, I'll say, negative connotation around it, and potential decisions that were made in the past about refusing a hotel and all that sort of stuff. You put up 4 things about what we could possibly do to bring a hotel here. Personally, I like to have faith in the market, and you were very, you've done great analysis here. Previously, I was only able to anecdotally say, if there was an opportunity for a hotel, it would be here. And now we've got the analysis, so thank you for that. I think we need to be, you're clearly indicated as an expert that it's not economically feasible right now. If it comes in, great, and I'm certainly not anti-hotel, but I wouldn't want us to see us start to look at offering up land or any other opportunities. We've got a lot of things that we've got to look after here in town, and so a hotel, great, but not a top priority on my list. So
Thank you.
those are my comments. I do have one kind of abstract question, but I'll let the mayor.
Let the mayor get in here, and then we'll come back after me. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. This was, when I read this part of the report, it was a great report. And if this isn't the top priority for this council, it's definitely in the top 3, notwithstanding what's going on. Because this is, through conversations we've had, this is coming out. And it was really nice to see it come out in that tactical framework so that we had actually plans. Because I was on council when we had the niche market study, and I remember doing wonderful workshops and going, we can do this, and it sat on the shelf and never moved. And so I'd like to make sure that we can really do, we hit an implementation phase, and I think with Rob and the resources that are being brought to bear, I think we'll hit the implementation. Some of it was good. It was like, yes, I knew it. Some of it was like, oh, really? Like the hotel? Oh, really? But it's better to know what we know, and we can deal with realities of life and move forward in a strong way. And so I guess the one question I have is, right now it's in draft framework. What needs to be done to finish this off to be able to put it in and then bring it back for implementation.
What we're looking for would be some, we'll incorporate comments that we've heard through this, and we'll work with administration, we'll work with Rob to make sure that we're addressing things appropriately, but it's more of a matter perhaps of, well, actually, there were two things that we did talk about before this meeting. First, on the hotel study, we thought we could incorporate a couple of examples of communities that have moved, like you just gave the example of Oliver, what they did and how things move forward. Yeah. On the economic development framework, I feel like we're a little light on describing the light industrial opportunities. We know it's not for a little while, but even while you're planning infrastructure, you want to have a good sense of what sectors you should be looking towards, and Rob has a gazillion great ideas on that, so we'll brainstorm those. And so I think what you'll see is those two things incorporated, and then I've noted a few, as I read it today again, I saw a few little typos and things that we have to clean up, but I think it's close, and based on your comments so far, the chair, Madam Chair, aside.
Sam and I are going to give you a couple more. But
I think we're
Yeah, the phrase, are you on the right track? Yes, you're on the right track.
yeah. We'll continue to, another thing is, we'll continue to support the rest of the team to ensure that the economic framework ideas are incorporated within the
Embedded.
overall. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of it's interdependent on other departments within Beaumont. So
Yeah, yeah.
It is going to take a team effort, and it has to be done. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you. And I'm not going to say anything different. I'm going to maybe ask a few points of clarification on a couple of things. The concierge service, I kind of like the idea of that. The streamlining, the helping people, being more proactive in terms of helping entrepreneurs and businesses to get where we want them to get. Rather than being a hurdle they have to get over, we are helping them to find what they need to do, which helps us. So I like the whole concept of that. I think that's excellent. Home-based businesses. So I'm glad to see that there's a strategic objective, but I'm not getting a real sense that there's a love in there. And I don't expect that, but it seems to me that there's a sense of that we have too many. Or is that, did I just pick that up in your presentation? And
I don't think you could have, no, I think maybe one of the things that we're trying to do is encourage home-based to not be home-based forever, for one.
How do you do that? Maybe that's the real question I'm asking. How do we do that?
Yeah. A couple of ideas are around creating some less expensive space that they can get into the community on. So co-working space, single desktop or shared spaces. Those are really, really positive ideas. When it comes to retailers, somehow encouraging them to, if they don't have the dollars alone to cover the cost of 1,000 square feet, partnering up with another retailer. So part of the BRE, part of those visitations, part of engaging with your business communities, you understand what everybody is trying to accomplish, and you can, Rob is going to be the key dot connector in the community, I think, right? Where he's heard a conversation from one person and relates it back to another that he's just having and saying, have you met Sally? She's looking to do something similar. Maybe the two of you should talk. And that's how an economic development officer really does earn their keep.
It's been said already that we're asking a lot of one person.
Yeah.
And so, I'll be interested in those budget conversations as well. But I wonder if Mr. Mackin, would you like to add anything? Or you're shaking your head, so I'm thinking you're good with this too.
I think we're very much aligned on this. Some of the activities have already got underway, the business walks, for example, trying to make those connections, and we're already having some very early discussions around getting that co-work type space that might be a bit multi-use, where you could allow retailers to come in certain times of the day, have co-working opportunities for home-based business. So we're already looking at that for the fall with the grant application coming forward.
Excellent.
I could add,
Yes.
Madam Chair, as far as resources, and I really appreciate the segue there, and we will definitely take advantage of it in budget time.
Don't miss a chance.
But in the meantime, we have done some retooling or repurposing within the planning and the infrastructure group to allow more resources to be working towards this type of stuff. And as a matter of fact, we have 2 postings out right now to get direct support for Rob and get some folks doing some of the tactical stuff, and we can get him more into the strategic stuff and moving this type of framework along. So we're not sitting by here
It's on the
idly.
street, it's not something you can just imagine, you have to actually do stuff, right? So, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Do you have one more? And I see another hand over there. So Sam and then Steve, and then we'll wrap this part up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is more of an abstract question, and I'm not going to take credit for the idea. I heard it at an engagement event. It was about encouraging business within Beaumont and the concern about leakage and everyone heading off to Edmonton to go to work. How do we encourage people to spend money on Beaumont? And so the idea was around Beaumont bucks. So I'm curious,
currency.
Not necessarily a currency, but more of a reward program type thing where instead of me filling up with gas, even though I catch the bus, but instead of Steve filling up with gas out in Sherwood Park, filling up in here in town, right? So just curious if you'd heard of anything like that before, kind of like a localized reward system, so that the 18,000 people in here, we're cognizant of it, and we fill up here, and we buy groceries here as opposed to on the way home. Hopefully you get the idea around it.
I understand.
Don't push it anymore, but any thoughts on that?
There are a ton of different ideas around this. Cochrane dollars is the most recent one, I think, that's rolled out right northeast of Calgary. And hey, I spent a bit of time with the Economic Development Officer at the Alberta Conference, Economic Developers Alberta, in February, March. And he had glowing things to say about it, and how the sort of 35 or 40 retailers who have subscribed to the program are feeling it as a positive. I have no other sort of evidence beyond that, whether it's working, but there are lots of examples like that. Shop local programs are incredibly popular. They're more commonly run by business improvement areas, BIAs, business improvement zones, which sort of acts like a shopping mall manager for the downtown, right? They're popular, especially around Christmas time, when people are doing a bit more. Well, for some retailers, it's like about 50% of their business between October and December. So it's a good time to emphasize shop local. But so much of your shopping right now is convenience oriented. How to get them to go to Safeway locally instead of somewhere else, and I don't know if I have a great answer for that. A lot of the responses we got were to the household survey, where people would say that I know I should, but I don't want you to make me feel guilty for not, because it's less expensive and I have more choice. I don't know if it's less expensive or not. I guess every house has their different spending patterns to judge by, but maybe there is a bit of a play on guilt that you could do it.
And I guess where I'm going from is, I think we need to incentivize it somehow, and a hashtag is one thing, but I think it'd be interesting. I'm very cognizant of the fact that I've said that there's a lot of work that we're putting on, Rob, already, but is it worth looking into that as part of that? That was the one thing that I didn't quite get out of this is how do we try and encourage, and there's a few sections on it, but how do we try and encourage, so I'd like to see a bit more expansion on that, if that's...
If I could just add to that point before I go to you, Councillor Newman, is the partnerships. So I don't think we have to do it all ourselves either. I think Chamber of Commerce, CWE, other business groups are chomping at the bit, looking for ways that they can be meaningful.
Yeah.
So I think we should encourage Rob to delegate.
There's definitely a lot of partners in the community that we work with, and I've seen Chamber of Commerce take leads on those, but obviously the support would be there.
And just a very quick thought. You may not have to look at it as just a shopping-specific thing. Maybe just boosting the overall pride in the community. St. Thomas, Ontario has hashtag St. Thomas Proud, and it's an overall, like it's a community-wide effort to just continually boast about why you like being in St. Thomas. And you do that enough times and people just kind of generally feel a bit more of a connection to their community, and probably their propensity to spend locally goes up. And it may not have to be as direct as you need to shop in town, but to just have something a little bit more umbrella.
Civic pride. Councillor Van Niekerk.
You betcha. One of the ideas and thoughts that I had that's grown for a bit, and I bounced it off Councillor Munkoff-Swain and another councillor, is just everything we're talking about today brings people to Beaumont 2 years from now, 3 years from now, planning, whatever else. One of the things that I've seen as I go around in communities, I'm fresh off 2 weeks of holidays and some more personal investigation and down some pathways. And one of them is, it was brought up in your presentation around markets and artisanal, craft makers. So I've seen the Centreville market, safe to say, explode. The grass is worn out, needs water, and there's there's this, that, and that's because there's so many people there, and I think that's a great thing. When I was in one of the communities in the States that I was just at, I actually ran into the person who runs the market for the town and quizzed them about, what do you get, who comes, how many people comes. The amount of people on the draw for that market is phenomenal. People come from, he says, claims, anecdotally, hundreds of miles around to come to this market. You can't even park downtown. We have parking ordinances just for the 3 or 4 times a month because it's that. One of the things that, when I think of destinations in Edmonton, I think of Old Strathcona as a destination. Collingwood Market, downtown market, whatever. There, the whole idea around Beaumont being a regional artisanal hub, a marketing hub. Us putting up a structure that has a roof and then people can bring tents. There's a whole bunch of different ideas, but I just wanted to throw that idea out there now because it's presented in here. Could Beaumont be a regional market destination? You've briefed on it in there. I see that growing in the short term and bringing people in the short term, while alongside developing longer term solutions. So just wanted to throw that out there, toss it to Rob, just put it out there, acknowledge that it's, presented in here. So
certainly a way where the economic development collides with the other aspects of the area redevelopment plan.
If I could add to that as well, often I hear people are coming into town for Chartier, people from outside are coming in, but they're coming at times when our shops are closed.
That's right.
And we've raised this, I think we raised it in our meeting with you.
Yeah.
So to encourage the entrepreneurs to think about that, and whether it's a marketplace or whether it's a retail or whatever, you're closed at the wrong time because this is when people are coming here and then they would shop here. So anyway, that's it.
If I may, Madam Chair. Councilor Newkirk, so there is some discussions already underway how to significantly expand that market in town using some of the spaces that were already identified in this, and actually working with the Alberta Farmers Market Association to make it a sanctioned event, so a lot of those regional 100-mile vendors
get on that
see
app.
Beaumont here as their major market in the south part of the city.
Cool. Yeah, we should connect, and I'd like to share some other stuff I found out.
Okay, I've gone past the 6:45 mark that I was supposed to stop you at, but it's been great discussion, so hopefully it's what you need. Do you need more time from us, or can we break now, and you stick around, or what? Finish this one?
There's one more.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, and I was thinking we might be finished, but you needed to wrap up.
And the next presenters that'll join me are on the parking strategy. And it's not the strategy, though. I just wanted to start with that. We're talking about where we're at in our work toward that, and just sharing our initial learnings, because that's what's informed the other components of work to date. The strategy development would be done in the next steps. So we're talking about what we've learned to date.
So this is more informational than looking for feedback?
More informational at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope everybody heard that.
More informational?
This isn't our last opportunity, though. There will be more.
Next question, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here today to present an update on the parking strategy development. We're currently at the end of phase 1 in a 3-phase process. Our work is lagging a little bit behind the rest of the material that you've heard today, but that is part of the process of development. We really need to understand the situation in Beaumont and then we'll understand where the plan is going to be going in order to make informed recommendations upon how a strategy could best integrate with the plan. We're going to highlight some of the research that was done in order to gain a better understanding of where we might be able to take parking strategy recommendations. First, we reviewed the existing material from Beaumont on studies that you've already done for your downtown urban design concept plan. The key component of that research showed us that using your own land use bylaw rates to that plan would require 935 parking stalls. However, when we measured the parking rates within Beaumont during a field study in April, we concluded that the parking could be satisfied with a total of 570 stalls. In summary, this tells us that there is an oversupply of parking that would be required if those land use bylaw rates were enforced upon full development. Some of the other studies that we looked at were from the town of High River as well as the city of Medicine Hat. These two studies were selected because they not only had an area redevelopment plan for their downtown, they had a parking study component to that. Not all area redevelopment plans include a specific parking study, so these were very informative for us. They had very similar findings that within those two jurisdictions there was an oversupply of parking within the overall downtown area. The recommendations from those two findings were similar to the recommendations from the two previous Beaumont studies, particularly to look at shared parking, creating maximum parking requirements, potentially funding off-site parking with cash in lieu, looking at active transportation or other comprehensive strategies. Finally, we looked at industry best practice to help guide where some of the parking strategies could proceed in the future. And the key thing to note with this has been a shift in the way parking is thought of in most municipalities and looking at optimal parking instead of just including free parking for every site. Going forward though, what a lot of municipalities are needing to rationalize is changing and updating their policies, changing their bylaws, which requires political support and strong cooperation. We included this as an example of an extreme case of shared parking versus site-specific included parking. We've got two hockey arenas. The top one is Rogers Arena in Vancouver, the bottom one is BBT Center in Miami. Both of them accommodate over 7,000 parking stalls. However, different management strategies have been used for both. Realize you're not going to be building an NHL-style arena in Beaumont, but it does highlight how, at a grand scale, shared parking has an impact and influence on the amount of development that can be accommodated around a facility. Whereas in the top picture, there's 1,000 stalls underground plus 6,000 shared stalls within the vicinity. In the bottom picture, there's 7,500 surface stalls. The next two graphs, or maps, highlight the findings from the parking study that was conducted in April. This graph of the weekday parking rates highlights the maximum observed parking rate for 41 different discrete areas within Beaumont. The study was conducted on a Wednesday between 11 and 6, and counts were done in 30-minute increments. This graph highlights the maximum parking that was observed throughout that 7-hour period. In average, the utilization rate was 37% during a midday typical Wednesday. Also note that this study represents over 1,000 parking stalls. Similarly, we highlight the parking demand observed on a Saturday in April. Notably, there are distinct areas that are higher than the weekday, particularly at St. Vital Church and at the Ken Nickel Rec Center. But in both areas, 50th Street has a larger proportion of traffic and parking than a lot of the surrounding streets in the plan area. Overall, there were 5 key findings from the parking survey that we wanted to highlight. First is the perception of parking issues. We realized that a lot of the perception stems from 50th Street itself being fully parked at peak times. However, we do want to consider parking within the overall Centreville area and look to ways to encourage parking turnover as opposed to having long stay. The other point is that the gravel parking lot just north of the community center is very underutilized, and that there's in the short term, a larger availability that could be used for parking in that location until it is redeveloped. We also want to consider shared parking and how that can be incorporated in future developments going forward, as well as to discuss shared parking with some of your existing establishments, potentially the church or the strip mall, south of the fire hall. And then to point out the utilization of on-street parking and how that could be better managed within the overall parking strategy. At this point, as mentioned, this is just a summary of the work that we've done to date. It helps us assess the demand that is currently in place based on existing established patterns. We'll be then matching that up with the potential supply required from the plan as developed and developing the overall parking strategy. Some of the options are noted as follows. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Quick questions. Thank you very much. Now that was enlightening and not really a surprise, but key word I kept hearing there was the political will. You know, it's whether or not we're going to be beat up for something that's a perception, not reality. Right? Okay, Mayor?
Yeah, just a couple of initial thoughts. Hearing that you're quite early and that you may be coming forth with some other stuff later, but the one idea that really intrigued me was the shared parking. And strategy. I really like, you don't have to answer today, but coming forward and further ones, I'd really like to see some strategies surrounding policies and governance that could encourage neighboring landowners to share and see what's going on. Because I found it really interesting that strip mall is fairly underutilized and it's right in the center of town. So as it redevelops and things like that happen. So just looking forward to seeing what's coming. And that was the one key point that really interested me about the whole thing. Thank you. See it.
Any others?
Yeah, no questions for me. I fully picked up on the political support as well. The best thing that you can provide us and arm us with is facts, and you have in here. That's something, and on some other issues we potentially probably didn't have, and it was challenging. I certainly agree that there is, I shouldn't say agree, this is your analysis, so the oversupply, I think we do have significantly too many parking stalls here, and there is that along the theme that we discussed earlier around walkability and making sure that if you're out of your car and you're not just parking just to jump in and jump out, more chance that you're going to visit a business. So are we on the right track? Absolutely. From my perspective, I think that in some cases less is more around this. And now we obviously need to have the conversation about 50th Street and what that means, because if you said less is more there, then it'd be a different conversation. So just important, and also the fact that it's the off-street parking right in front of the business, and some ways to clean that up. So I really appreciate the report and the facts that were there, and good hard data to be able to have some conversations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything? Yeah, Councillor.
Would you be able to flip back to that slide that just shows the different zoning, the different types of parking? There was one piece of parking, and I know it's minute, before this yet? Or I guess, was that your summary there with the weekday?
Yeah,
those are the two maps, yes.
So there's a hunk of parking behind Chartier and Jeff's that I would classify as private off-street parking that isn't highlighted in here. Is there a reason for that?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if that one was specifically identified for capture
Okay.
in the field study.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's fine. They have some parking allocated to residents and then some parking that is overflow for the business there. So I think that's going forward. I think that's an important piece to put in there because there's a fair bit of stalls back there.
Yeah.
People don't use them. So even though you can walk right to the business in 30 feet, so that's just a informational comment, I guess. In response to the big gravel lot, it's underutilized for sure. It requires improvement. We would need to increase connectivity for it to be as part of a more broad parking solution downtown. Need another access point or two. I think those things are all, obviously well known, right? And it's underutilized for sure. So I agree.
Madam Chair, if I could just add, through the engagement with stakeholders, what we did here is it could be utilized more if there was lighting.
That too. Good point. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Especially in the winter.
Just about 2 more comments. There was conversation about reducing, what would it be? Putting in traffic moving or parking moving measures as in timed parking and stuff like that. We just have to be cognizant of the other side of that scale is enforcement and consistent enforcement. So I just wanted to say that today is that, if we do something like this, we got to be prepared to be consistent and enforcing it on the back end. That's very important for everyone. I think it was important for you to say that there's perceived parking issues downtown. Of all the numbers you presented in here, the only number that I didn't see, and I don't know if it's a number you would get from your interviews or if there's statistics on this in your line of work, is how far, when someone parks, how far are they willing to walk for service? Because there's bubbles. I'm sure there's a bubble map that you can build around these parking lots. That might be a valuable piece to educate residents in the future, because much like desire lines in landscape architecture, that whole piece, there are also bubble maps that, say how far are people willing to go? And, just an idea anyways, so.
Madam Chair, Councillor, thank you for that because we can certainly utilize that for the third engagement in terms of the charrette to test.
And I think that would help people in the perceived parking problem if we could show how much room there actually is and how far it isn't if you park over here. It's actually not that far.
And like you said, people don't know where some of these lots are.
Maybe, or don't know they're accessible, or don't know they're allowed. I bet you there's a whole bunch of the population that doesn't know they're
private.
allowed to go in that dirt lot back behind Mario's.
Yeah, there isn't a big sign that says park here.
It's not inviting and it's not lit. So, yeah. And last piece is that there was 2 comments around revenue generating and stalls. I'll combine them. So the comment was reducing parking requirements, as in for the businesses, makes way for more revenue generating development. I think that's a powerful statement. It's buried in here, but I think that's a powerful statement that probably needs to bring forward that idea around, when you bring businesses front and you put parking back, then, you're increasing visibility, you're increasing revenue building opportunities, yes, at the expense of parking while promoting walking. And I think that whole idea needs to shine a bit more as we move forward. And that goes alongside the numbers you had with Beaumont's land use bylaw parking rate for general retail is 5 stalls per 100. Yeah. I see there's a lot of numbers in there. I look forward to that discussion in the future. So, yeah, that's what I got.
Okay, thank you very much. Lots of work, lots of great work. Really appreciate all of it. And
it's fun to work.
Do we need to do any more?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for your accommodation of our time to get through all of the components. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so we're going to take a break. Okay? No one's going to disagree with that? What time do we usually get back at? Start us off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, council members. I'm here tonight to provide the Committee of the Whole with a summary and the overview of the draft Council Code of Conduct. The recent changes to the MGA state that municipalities must establish a code of conduct by bylaw that governs the code of conduct for all councillors under Section 146 in the Municipal Government Act. The MGA, previous to that, did not require a municipal code of conduct. However, we did have a council-approved policy number 8, which stated council code of conduct, in which our councillors followed by, set out. That was approved on September 11th of 2012. So the purpose of this bylaw is to establish a foundation for governance as well as standards for ethical and interpersonal conduct for all members of council. The bylaw also supports and aligns with the Beaumont's values. Accordingly, it is the purpose of the Code of Conduct to outline certain basic rules for elected municipal government officials to carry out. In drafting this proposal, administration reached out to a number of other codes of conduct, doing research and best practices, and attachment is what I've come up for the draft. So I'm here tonight to go over any questions that committee members may have, give a little bit more details if you need on what's changed with regards to the MGA and what municipalities need to know with regards to the items that I've outlined in the draft bylaw.
Thank you very much. So, questions of clarification first off? Anybody? Pretty straightforward. Just one in terms of process. There's no public hearing requirements for this particular bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, there's no public hearing that's actually needed. So I will be bringing the Code of Conduct to the July 24th council meeting, and I will be coming for all 3 readings with unanimous for 3rd reading. We do have to have this Code of Conduct in place as of July 23rd, so we will be 1 day late. I did notify Municipal Affairs, and there wasn't any concerns with that, with it coming to council on the 24th, given council calendars.
Thank you for that update. Councillor Moncrief.
No, thank you. You answered my question. My concern was that a member of council may not be here for it and to go through all 3 readings, but to your point, we need it in place, so that makes sense to me. And as with anything, if there's any concerns, it can always be brought up at a later date, so I'm okay.
Thank you. Yes, so Madam Chair, through to Councillor Moncrief-Swain. We must establish this code of conduct, and we don't have a choice. The outlines that I've drafted within this are all within regulation of what every municipality follows within the MGA requirements. So there's nothing in this actual bylaw that would be out of context for anything. It's everything that all councillors, elected officials need to follow. So there's nothing out of the ordinary that would kind of shoot out as something to flag it.
It seemed very similar to what we had in place.
It is very similar.
Were there any changes?
Yes, Madam Chair, there have been a few little changes where we've added a little bit more. So we have one with regards to sanctions in previous. Okay. With regards to that, we can, within this bylaw, impose sanctions. In our council policy, there was nothing about imposing sanctions. So there is that in the Code of Conduct, again, following the regulations. With regards to the process for filing a formal complaint or an informal complaint, that's something that's new in there with regards to investigating the complaints and how they're handled. So that's new within the bylaw. Again, it is following the regulations and the set out regulations within the MGA.
Any other comments? Questions? So we are just basically being given a heads up? And you're bringing it forward as a formal, so we don't need a motion of any kind?
No, Madam Chair, this is just basically to give you kind of the first look and just giving you, because I am bringing it next week for unanimous for all 3 readings, I just wanted to give you a first look at it and just see if you had any questions or needed any further.
There's 2 typos, so.
Okay, that's.
On page 159 of 191, municipal assets in the title. And number 15 on page 160, remuneration.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
And that's it for me, so good?
Yeah, no, it's straight out of the MGA.
Yeah. It's good to have it renewed and refreshed and everybody's aware of it. Are we good? I don't know what his signaling is meaning. Working on this, okay. Okay, so we can keep going on, correct?
Yes.
All right. Let the people that are watching on Facebook know that we're We're still talking, our mouths are moving.
We still have sound.
Oh,
So pick it
but the
up.
sound is being picked up. Okay. So then the next item, you don't hear again, Ms. Winter, for council boards and committees review. Item 3A, 3C.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. On April 10th, 2018, Council by resolution directed administration to review past, current, and future opportunities for committees, including composition, appropriate resource allocation, strategic duplication. Council's most important roles include the consideration of passage of municipal bylaws, financial planning, budget approval, the appointment of chief administrative officer, and the determination and the basic internal organization of the municipality. Tonight I'm here to seek more information and direction. I have pulled together and done some research with regards to these committees. I'm looking to seek further direction with regards to council wanting to continue its current committees of council, and I will go over those committees in just a moment, and then also to seek direction from committee on which past committees that council would like us to look into further. On the second page of my RFD, there is a list of closed committees that the town has had previously. If there's any on those committees, I would need direction with regards to those if there is a specific committee that council would want us to reopen and revisit. I do need to point out that depending on how far back these committees go, we may have limited information depending on the year that they were, just with our records retentions. So that's for our closed committees. With regards to our committees, as I had previously kind of going throughout this process with our boards and committees, our first set that I'm going to talk about in my attachment is the regional boards and committees. So these are cross-regional. So these are boards and committees that we have to have council representation on. So we don't have the opportunity to decide whether or not council can or cannot be part of it. It's the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, it's the Leduc Foundation, the Alberta Capital Region Wastewater Commission, Yellowhead Regional Library Board. These are the types that we do have to have council representation at. With regards to other boards and committees, we have 3 of them. We have the Community Adult Education Council. I did have to do a little bit of background information on this one, as there's been no movement on this one since 2015. However, it is mandated by the province. We do need a councillor on it. We do have a councillor on it. I was in contact with them most recently, and now we're looking into possibly being able to have that committee more part of Beaumont with regards to post-secondary education in Beaumont. So that's something our economic development officer is going to be working on with this council, and so I think it's really important. I also forwarded them our councillor who's the rep on that, which is Councillor Hendricks, and he'll be contacting him to go over to try and get this council up and running more and to see what they can do for Beaumont. So I think it's really important to stay on this committee, and it's mandated by the province.
So it actually meets?
Sorry? Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to not since 2015. They have the actual council hasn't met.
Adult Education Council? Is that the one?
Yes. Yes. Not since 2015 they haven't met, but they have restructured the council. So they will be bringing together all the different, the problem was attendance. They have problems. And members aren't attending unless it's being hosted in their community. So they resurrected it, and now they restructured it. And so I feel by doing the research that I've done on it, and then speaking with our Director of Economic Development, that potentially we could actually lever this post-secondary for Beaumont. So.
Okay.
With regards to the Beaumont District Agriculture Society, you do not have to have a council member on this. Within their bylaws, it states that a council member is an associate member, but within their bylaws, it's not directed and it's not mandated for them to actually have a council member. Looking into it, going by governance piece, my research and into other communities, there's no governance piece for a council member to be on this society. So if council should want to proceed forward with a council member appointed to it, or should they decide in October at the organizational meeting to make recommendations. With the other committees of council, all of them basically have a governance piece to them. So it would be my recommendation to continue on those boards. The Municipal Planning Commission, we did dissolve that one, and the CAO now has the authority for that one, so that one will be coming off on the committees. The Corporate Partnership Steering Committee, my research that I've done on that, I do feel that it is within core operations, and I do feel it's more operational in nature, and I would recommend to dissolve this committee, should council approve that, and any of the policy decisions that would be coming out of this would be coming to council anyways, so there is a little bit of repetition there. The Promotions Committee, they do have it within their bylaw that they do need a council member on it. However, it's not a governance piece, and council, should they wish to not have a council member on that, the bylaw would be rescinded. And the other committees that we have are all, as I said, governance committees that do require to have council. Oh, and sorry, I did forget one, that would be the library board. The library board does not require to have a council member within the library board, within the act.
You finished your presentation?
Yes, thank you.
You mentioned a lot of committees and your recommendations, but I don't have those written down, so I don't know how we're going to make sure but I'm going to open it up to council at this point, but you may have to remind us if we don't hit one that you want us to hit. So first, Councillor Van Newkirk.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify, I'm not looking for recommendations this evening for that. I'm just giving an overview of all of the committees. I will be bringing more information further when I get direction this evening with regards to past committees and future committees. Then I'll be bringing it together, and I will be making a recommendation on whether or not
directly
council
to
wants
council at that point, or are you suggesting that you'd come back to the committee?
Your choice.
It would be your choice, Madam Chair.
I guess depends on how the discussion goes in terms of whether there's consensus or not.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I would be looking to bring this and have everything set out for before the operational organizational meeting in October. So then at that point,
so we don't want to put to do this, but we want to move on it and get it done.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's hear what the councillors have to say. And Mayor, Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, I guess a question on the committees. So one of the committees that I'd like to propose that we bring back to life is some kind of sports and advisory. I've talked to the CAO and the mayor around that, and but I actually don't see where it would have been a closed committee. I've heard in the past that we had one in the past, but I don't know where it fits. But I'd like to put forward that we figure out the name and terms of reference and all that stuff for some kind of sports committee, but I don't see where it fits in the list of closed committees.
Okay.
If that.
Don't worry about the closed committees.
Okay.
We might just form a new one.
Okay. Okay, so that's...
So that's feedback that Parks and Recreation, or just Recreation?
Yeah, so the spirit of it would be to have, a Sports and Recreation Advisory Group, a recreational committee, like open to naming and ideas, but the whole idea is to bring together the sporting groups into a local board.
And I'm just not sure we want to debate any of this now. I don't necessarily agree yet. I have some questions for that, but you just want, basically we're just giving you...
So Madam Chair, I just to Councillor Van Newkirk's comments, I have actually been researching that board, because that is something that you've brought up in council meetings and have. So I've started the research with regards to a committee of that nature that would involve all of the different sports groups and whether or not a council member would be part of that, or how exactly that would work. So I have reached out to other communities, kind of seeing what they have in place. So I have been doing that research. I just wanted to confirm with all of the committee of the whole that that is a committee that everybody wants to have me do further research.
My point of view on this one is I'm just concerned about the group that started in the community. that has that as their mandate, and I feel like we shouldn't be taking over something that a community group is willing to do, but we can support it and help it. So that's my concern about taking that approach.
Well, there's actually two groups in the community that I agree, but they need to be supported and helped in
I agree with
a bit of
that.
a more direct line. One is Beaumont Sports and Rec, and the other is Beaumont Arts.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the two of those, I think, need to be looked at as to what degree that participation the council wants to have, and to what degree they need to be a council committee, a committee of council. Yes, I'm going to follow up this. Agrees with Councillor Van Newkirk that we need to have those.
I'm open to all conversation on it, right? I just wanted to.
Okay, maybe
But it's
it's
not a-
degrees of how we do that I'd
Yeah.
like to discuss.
You betcha. Yeah.
So the reality, like, was as the mover up of the motion that did this, so sort of the thinking behind this was as you're thinking about this, you should be thinking about does a councillor being on this committee add value to council? And is there a governance piece? Because that's our job. And so what would add value to council? I know the Arts Committee and the Beaumont Sports and Rec would add value to council. We can decide what that looks like, or if we chime in with the existing, or they kill it and go new, or there's a whole bunch. We don't have to get in a rush. But things like the Promotions Committee and the Beaumont District Ag and the Partnership Steering Committee and some of these things, they fall into the nice-to-haves. But we don't necessarily, there's not necessarily a governance piece, and they're not necessarily cutting off communication links that we can't get from some other way.
Can I just clarify?
Sure.
Explain to me the difference in governance piece from that perspective, because when you said Promotions Committee is one example, I think they do administrative work, but I think there's also
but there's
a
no-
role there for
There's no governance. So the only thing that council is doing
Influence.
is bringing information from the committee back to council. But even that's not really happening because the chair comes every year and presents the yearly thing, and we're not getting information back. And the role of the promotions committee has also changed. At one time, there was two councillors and an alternate, and the role of the promotions committee was to go out and actually promote the committee. Where now it's turned into, or promote the community, and now it's turned into, we're going to organize events in town. Does a council member have to, like, you can be on the committee, but do we really need a council member to be on there? Is there any governance piece there? No, they're following the bylaw. We're not making policy. We're not making change. We're just there chiming in. Is that valuable? And if the answer is yes, we'll go with it.
Maybe it could be different, but I don't know.
But if the answer is no, then we should get off and let them go do their work.
Madam Chair, I just want to put in with regards to the Promotions Committee, we do have staff, town employees that do work with this committee and go to all the meetings and do go with all of the planning. So there is a piece there that we are working with that committee, administration is working with that committee.
I understand that, but where's the relevance to the governance piece versus?
If council is looking at boards and committees on with regards to what is the governance piece, is there policy being made within these committees? Or is
Versus
it
administrative?
versus administration, correct? What is the policy piece within those committees?
It's coming.
You want to follow up on this one?
Just following down that vein, if you look at the library committee,
Library board?
Library board, sorry. Maybe I could get myself into real trouble here. But if you look at the library board, we give them a sizable chunk of money, and there's all sorts of policy and procedure that gets decided on that board as to how that money gets spent and things like that. So I would suggest that committee has a big governance piece where we don't necessarily need to be on the board, but we probably should.
Right.
And that's sort of how I'm differentiating it.
And the recreation one, though, you said governance, so I'm not there, you're talking more development, aren't you?
Well, that's advisory as we go through recreation master plans and policy development, and then it is.
So that's a whole different thing. There's governance and advisory. Okay. Yes.
From a process perspective, and I know we're walking a fine line here, we brought this back today to get direction on 3 specific areas, not necessarily to debate which committees should stay up and running. One of those questions is there some past committees that you would specifically like us to consider. The second one, which is I believe is what's being discussed and debated here, is there a desire to look at the current committees, even though they don't have a mandatory requirement or a governance piece? And if the answer to that is yes, then we will bring that information back, all of those committees, with as Ms. Winters had shown, whether there is a mandatory representation or a governance representation, and then we can debate whether council can debate whether it wants to continue. And then the third piece of direction we're looking for is back to what Councillor Newkirk and the Mayor just suggested is, are there specific new committees that you would like us to bring back? So I'm just trying to change that line from debating whether they should be in or not, because that's the next step. So we're looking for those three pieces of direction, and then we will bring back more information. And just by the sounds of the discussion, I think it should come back to the committee of the whole.
Do you want to chime in before I go back to Stephen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, certainly the comments that are not devaluing the role of the committees, it's just making sure that there is a need for a council of it. I think it's what we're trying to get to.
Bang on, that's what I was.
Yeah. Sorry, I did have, just quickly, on the Aquafit Phase 2 Mother Duval Steering Committee, I'm sure we'll be looking at that. It may not be needed. Certainly the Mother Duval steering piece probably doesn't need to be there. The question I had though around, I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, around I don't know whether it's a committee or some sort of meeting, whether it's a monthly meeting between kind of council, mayor, administration to look at the agendas coming up for the month. We kind of talked a little bit about it through that George Cuff session. We had one session here where we kind of threw some ideas out, but I'd like to see, and I don't know if it's a committee or if that's even the right word or if this is the right place, but at some point I'd like a discussion around a monthly conversation to look at what's coming up over the next month and what should jump up on committee of the wholes versus agendas. I know there's a heavily strong administrative piece to that, but where this is coming from is the same comment that was made during the George Cuff sessions, is a lot of the work that is put in front of us is very reactive from a councillor, I'll speak for myself, perspective, and so like to see an opportunity to try and see if we can shape that a little bit more, at least be part of the conversation as opposed to just getting it there. So I don't know if this is the right venue to have that conversation, but I just wanted to get that out there.
Madam Chair, through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain, I have been researching as well with regards to Agenda Committee, because I do know that is something that came out of the George Cuff session. Typically, the agenda committees do fall within large cities like Calgary and Edmonton, where they have multiple projects and infrastructure going on where they need to have that. That committee compromises of typically the mayor and deputy mayor and the CAO. It's not something that's done with all of council. It's done. We do now currently. And in the past, do send those agendas to the mayor to review for those things. And we try to bring things to committee of the whole and council, looking at the governance side of what needs to come to council, what is governance, and trying to look at that. Unfortunately, Beaumont is a growing, soon-to-be city, and we have a lot of planning and a lot of development things that are coming onto the agenda that we have to get through to council, and we do need those decisions to come through council. So
just to follow up, and to the point that the CAO made, we're not here to debate it. I would like to see it brought back as an option.
Yep. Thank you for that. Councillor Hendricks, do you want to?
May I just chime in about the promotions committee? I think if we could stabilize that committee as soon as possible in terms of this discussions here. I'm hearing different things again tonight. Thankfully, our administration has some of those, the promotions committee, saying that things are being stabilized in terms of need, strategy, and process moving forward. Also, in terms of information, certainly the information from the promotions committee has gone also through a series of administrative changes. So at one point we were submitting minutes to council, but over time, administrative recommendations were to not submit those, as I recall, to council. We had that as part of, as I recall, our bylaw piece. I wouldn't mind just reestablishing that. And I think even if it's just for information purposes then you get that full package and fully understand what the promotions committee is doing. The other thing, the other liaison piece, if there is no officer on that committee, and I've been on it 4 years now, and I've been part of it since it was initially instituted, is that we need somebody to bring the message then from council to that group. Last time out, council suggested they needed yet another event to break up the winter, and that process began because it was brought to me and I got after it. So that process is underway. But we've also had some other discussions from admin about what is the promotions committee supposed to be doing. So are we events? Are we going to the community? Are we marketing? So we're getting this mixed messages coming back. As a result, the strategic planning committee or strategic planning meeting hasn't happened yet for this particular term. So I think we're all so we need direction.
Just question for clarification. What's the strategic planning committee?
No, of the promotions committee.
Oh,
okay. So we're just going to have a strategic planning meeting. We had one prior, then we had administration suggest perhaps some changes, and some of those people that were involved at that time have been released from the community. And now we're all waiting to see what is in the promotions committee.
So time is of the essence for that committee, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
that there's been a bit of a worry about where it's going?
I would argue, definitely I'd argue a worry. I think if you look at what our membership numbers are right now and the need for more people.
If we lose volunteers there, we lose a lot of events. It's pretty important from that perspective.
Our volunteer piece right now and the need for committee members is pretty significant right now. Yeah. So things are happening that are creating that.
Yeah. There's tension there. So our process tonight is to make sure Shalane Ms. Winter has the list of committees to bring back to our attention, correct? That's correct. What we're going to debate at a future, we're not making decisions tonight?
And I've been part of an exit interview process too, with a member and admin, and certainly got very loud discussions about where, clear discussions as to where this thing needs to go.
It needs clarity. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to confirm that on this list, there was nothing that kind of looked out with regards to previous and looking at past, so I don't need to go into the past to look at any of these ones on the list, and that what the committee members are giving direction on is to look into an agenda committee, sports and recreation committee, and Beaumont Arts Committee.
There's a few more, Councillor. I have two more. So, did you have another point? You had your hand up before.
The point I was going to make was one. Councillor Monkoff-Swain about not devaluing committees, just talking about where they fall. So that's fine. Thank you.
Did you have any others?
No, I don't.
Okay. So just from my point of view, and I don't know. Like I get a little mixed up when you're saying governance is the criteria, because there's another criteria for me, and it's about involvement of the community and working together with community. And I think promotions committee is a good example of that. I think there's other examples, maybe it's recreation, maybe it's the arts, where advisory, there's a role there to play where we talk together and we do things together, where it's not governance, it's more of a working collaboratively towards what we want in our community. To that end, I've asked before, and it came back from the administration, no, it's not best practice, and this was in a previous council. And that's around social services and FCSS and support services for our community. And I know we talked about that, we've had debates about it. I don't know if this council is of that same mind or not, but just like recreation is important, so is supporting our community members, and whether it's food security or something else, housing. I mean, there's all kinds of issues that people are dealing with. Yes, we have staff, and I'm not saying we don't, we have great staff, but there's also less of a linkage between the community and council on those issues than I would like to see. So that's one I'd like on the list, to at least have an explanation of, again, this council can talk about what's our role in that.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So if you can just give clarification, because you did provide quite a few different areas with regards to, are you just looking at a committee with regard just to FCSS? Because you
Other
kind of,
municipalities have gone community services,
Just
advisory
communities.
committee, where they've included recreation and social services and arts.
okay.
I've been through that, and I'm okay with that, but right now, there is no table for councillors to have a conversation with community around those issues. And I just think, once in a while, childcare being a real good example, we ought to be talking about other ways of dealing with this, not just in the administrative way. So that would be the one I'd like to further talk about. I don't think I had any others. So if that's where we stop with this one, and you'll bring back further information. Okay?
So with regards to bringing back further information, I will bring it back to a committee of the whole.
I think that'd be a good idea myself.
I just wanted to save one comment for the end after things were wrapped up. So I sit on the Capital Region Waste Minimization Advisory Committee. It's a very underpowered committee, and I see it says council representation, yes, under the terms of reference for that, so yes, I continue going. The value Beaumont gets from that is very low. The committee doesn't have a bunch of teeth, and it's kind of a waste of my time. But I'll continue to go because we're supposed to be there, so I don't know.
That debate.
Well, yeah, bring that one back and see.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, Councillor Monkoff-Swain?
It's a similar point. I wasn't sure whether we should bring it up here, but my man did, so thank you. So would that be something that we would, on other committees, because I know it's under a regional board, therefore we're mandated, but I'm not sure if they're, is it mandated that we have to send 2 people to this committee? Well, that's something.
Which one?
The Water Commission?
Southwest Water Commission.
We need to be there.
No, I know we need to be there. And so again, I don't want to get into the debate here, because I didn't want to bring it up. So when you come back, would that be the time to have that conversation?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Councillor Monkoff-Swain. My recommendation for that would be for you to forward me the regional ones that you're speaking of, so I can look into their terms of reference, because it could be mandated by the province that we be part of those regional groups. So I would need to do the research on those, and I would like to do it prior to that meeting, so to avoid any delay in anything, so then I can come to that meeting and say yes or no, you have to attend those meetings.
Just as a follow-up, I fully understand that a lot of the onus is on us as well to improve the committees that we go to. It's not just, it's not worth our time, so let's not go. That's not what I'm saying. I just would like to have a discussion around that, so I'm looking forward to that. The other thing that I had a question on, and I'm not sure if it was part of the notice of motion where it comes into, but or if we've already done it, we might have already signed off on this, but about term limits getting kind of synthesized terms of references. Okay, 2 years, must be advertised, that sort of thing. Is that something else I'm getting confused on, or could that be part of this process in terms of committee members, public at large?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Councillor Monkoff-Swain. That's something that is completely different with regards to that. So, for instance, I don't want to pick on the promotions committee, but I will say the promotions committee, because that is something that we do have residents within the community and that we advertise. So if we were looking at not having council representation, or maybe we were looking at having more council representation, we would be changing the bylaw. Therefore, we could change the advertising within that bylaw. So they do kind of go hand in hand together, depending on what the committee is. When it comes to the regional boards and committees, we don't have any say in those committees. So so I couldn't really say that. But with regards to the council ones, those are ones that we can look at. One of our committees is the SDAB. It's mandated by the province. It falls within the MGA. We don't have options to be able to choose to change anything within that board. So with regards to the advertising, because there was recent municipal changes for the SDAB bylaws, it'll be coming forward with the changes, and that can be another part of that piece that will include I'm going to be tightening up the membership of that, and the terms, and who, and the recruiting process of it. So that piece will slowly kind of be coming through council, not all at once, but it'll kind of slowly be filtering in.
Thank you.
And the last one for me is the CCBCC. And it's heads up for letting councillors know that that advisory committee is wanting to expand its role or clarify its role and be more of a decision-making body. So that kind of a discussion, I think, should be on the list as well as to where council sits on that. They'll be coming forward in September to a committee of the whole. I'm the rep there. And CCBCC. Changing terms of reference, and one of the issues there is they can't get members, and it's an advisory committee to council, but if the members, St. Vital group hasn't sent somebody, and the Club Beaumont doesn't exist anymore, so there we are, 3 people, and one of them's a councillor, and we're like, so this isn't working, something's not working, right. So they want to come back and present to this committee and see what they can do. So they've got a plan in place. So I think that should be on the list because that is a work in progress.
Okay.
Okay. Enough on that?
That's good.
Good. Thank you. Oh, shucks, you don't get to do the next one? Cannabis. Mr. Hiltz.
No, it's actually...
Oh, actually, it's Jason. Mr. Cook. Yes. And Jason. Okay.
You got away from this one?
He's here. Take it away. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Just prior to beginning, I'd just like to formally introduce our new Supervisor of Municipal Enforcement, Jason Springham. He's been with us now coming up on 2 months and brings with him approximately 18 years of experience in enforcement services. And he's a definite asset to the team, and I'm sure as he spends more time in the committee and works on projects with respect to enforcement, protective services, you folks will see the benefit of having Jason here with the town of Beaumont. Madam Chair, we're here tonight to discuss with a request for direction regarding the forthcoming cannabis consumption bylaw, and we're looking for feedback from this committee with respect to the direction for the town of Beaumont and what the future with regards to the consumption of cannabis will look like in the town of Beaumont. As the committee members know, October 17th is the date set by the federal government for the legalization of cannabis, and with that date comes the regulations that the federal government has imposed. Just as a couple highlights, the permissions to have 4 plants in your residence, and of course for an adult to have on their person up to 30 grams of cannabis. There is also the taxation legislation coming from the federal government as well. Further to that, opportunity was passed on to the provincial government for further tightening up, if you will, of the regulations, which also include the distribution, which the province of Alberta has taken control of cannabis, and that will be dealt with under acts that have recently changed within the province of Alberta. And then, of course, the province has passed on to the municipalities the opportunity to frame, again, the consumption of cannabis within each one of our communities. Administration has taken time over the course of this new direction of permitting or legalizing cannabis by watching and taking close note of what our neighboring communities are doing, as well as others throughout the province of Alberta. We've had a good look at our existing bylaws and what other legislation is out there within the province and what we may rely on. And of course, too, we engaged our residents this past spring, which saw the interest in regulated sales coming forward, but also to the fact that consumption in the public was also a concern. And we had 640 residents respond to that, and I believe Council had that presentation back in May. Further, administration is also looking at engaging the public at 2 opportunities, one on July 25th and another on July 29th, with our friends who brought you the land use bylaw for also seeking consultation or at least input from residents, taking forward ideas and the direction, again, coming from this committee with regard to the consumption of cannabis. Just as a very high-level highlight or look at what our neighboring communities have done or are doing with regards to the consumption of cannabis, the City of Airdrie is prohibiting the cannabis consumption within the city unless it's in a private residence or at 4 special consumption locations provided throughout their community. The City of Edmonton bylaw approval is on hold and is going back to their council on September 12th. And of course, as we all heard, Edmonton was taking a very liberal approach, but there's been recent changes, and of course, we're watching that very closely. The City of Grand Prairie has taken a moderate approach with specific consumption restrictions, including expanded restrictions for the use of tobacco and smoking, as well as banning specific locations within their town for consuming cannabis. Further, the City of Leduc is banning consumption in all public areas, while Lethbridge is monitoring and taking a much more slow approach with regulation, with regards to regulations and the implementation in their communities. Further to that too, if I may add, and it's not included in the request for decision package, is the steps taken by Okotoks, which we recently obtained, and the bylaw that they're moving forward with, which has identified that no person shall smoke in designated public places or within 10 meters of any child under the age of 18 who is not in direct custody or care or control.
Oh, God. I don't know how you would work that.
Is this your kid? No?
Madam Chair, what I'd like to do is actually turn the microphone to Jason Springham, who will review our bylaws and some of the findings we have within, and just bring a little bit more information forward to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So, Madam Chairman, Chris Council, one of the things that we're doing currently right now is what do we have in place, right, and how do we carry forward from there? So, identifying, one of our current bylaws is smoke-free public places and workplace bylaw, right? That was established in 2003, so that was 2 years prior to the Tobacco and Smoking Reduction Act. So, from there, that's sort of our baseline, and what we're moving forward to is obviously a little bit of housekeeping. We're talking about term definitions. Aligning it with legislation that's coming forward with respect to the Tobacco and Smoking Reduction Act and regulations, and as well as the Gaming and Liquor and Cannabis Act and regulations as well. So we can start from there, and then where we go, we can't reduce it, but we could put more restrictions from that point. So for some of the things that are coming up, obviously we're defining, with respect to smoking, tobacco, vaping, electronic cigarettes. Again, the use and consumption of cannabis. These all sort of tie into, what our framework is going to be looking at going forward. And I'm going to talk in very general terms. Obviously, you have a lot of information. We've had some municipal comparisons. It seems that every day that we seem to have a new bylaw that has been brought forward by another municipality. Comparison right now is really, there's not a lot of consistency. Everybody seems to be developing their own legislation. For council right now to consider, really it's almost a three-tier system. So are we going to go at an all-out prohibition, create a hybrid type of legislation with respect to, there's partial prohibitions to certain areas, but we're talking about maybe there's permits with respect to special events, and then going at it very lax and very, at the bare bones minimum. And what we're looking for is some direction and some discussion from council. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to start? I'm going to sneeze in a minute, so I'm going to start talking. Would councillors like to, Mayor, would you like to mention any comments at this point? Because for me, it's still this big out here. I don't know where we're going, but.
Sure, I'll weigh in a couple things. I noticed halfway in the report, page 179 and 191, I'd like us to consider rescinding bylaw 59303, the smoke-free public places, and then create a new bylaw. I think I'm on board with creating a whole new bylaw that covers all of those items: smoking, tobacco, vaping, electronic cigarettes, and coming kicking and screaming into the new age. It's kind of fun through the EMRV. We did get exposed to some reports from the states, the Denver area being one that was specific. And they had the same issues. The municipalities there had the option to how to regulate it and how to do it. A little bit different situation. We had some provincial guidelines they didn't have to follow. but the towns and cities that ran into the biggest problems had the loosest rules. The towns and cities that managed to make the transition, and of course they had taxing power, so it was profitable for them, regulated it heavily. And so I'm of sort of a mind where we should be, I'm not necessarily sure we'd be following the city of Leduc, maybe somewhere between the city of Leduc and the city of Grand Prairie, putting some restrictions around where and how it can be done and things like that. And so I'm really pro putting in some actual teeth into this and putting some regulations around where and when and how it can be consumed.
Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, the key thing for me around this, excuse me, is about simplicity. It's got to be easy to understand for the public and easy to enforce from your perspective. Like, to me, we'll debate, how liberal it is versus how strict. But to me, as long as it's simple to understand, that's what I think is going to be the key. And so when I see different things about, if your kid's 17 or 18, and whether it's your parent or someone else's parent, can you smoke within 10? Like, that is a no-go for me. I would agree with the mayor to rescind the bylaw. I did have a quick question on it before I go any further, and I should know it, but I don't. The smoke-free public places, to me, a public place is a trail. It's walking down 50th Street. If I read that literally, can you smoke a cigarette walking down on a trail? Cigarette?
Yes, you can. Right. There's, with respect to, again, it's all getting in the definition portion of it. You can frame that as sort of tight or as open as you want to be. We're talking about something that the public, we're talking more of the general areas where the public might congregate.
Yeah.
With respect to that, because what we're looking at with that bylaw, it superseded, or it was preceded before we actually had the Tobacco and Reduction Act. So for us, we kind of know anything that's inside that bylaw, it's old.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah. So then, if I can continue my thinking, so I would agree, rescind it. I'd like to see us address it all wrapped up into one. I'd like it to be as simple as possible. I'm interested to get an understanding around the thinking of the Airdrie model, where they designated 4 areas. For me, I've given this a lot of thought. I guess where I struggle is it my role as council? If I had my way, let me put it this way. If I had my way, I would say that there's no smoking of any kind in a public place. I think if you want to do it in your private home, fine. I get that you might need to look around, outside bars that, people want to walk out and have a cigarette at a restaurant, all that sort of stuff. There might be some of those type of designated areas. So that would be where I would start. But what I have a concern with is that my role as a councillor, as in, that's more of a, is that my role to kind of project that out into the community on what they can and can't do? So that's where I struggle. But I certainly start on the end of I would limit it to any public place. You can't. So similar to the Leduc, but I would wrap smoking, vaping, electronic cigarettes, all that sort of stuff into one. Again, going with the simple one. But I'd be really interested in hearing other arguments around it and people's comments on whether they think that's our role to mandate that. So yeah, I'll leave it at that as my comments.
Yes,
To Madam Chair and the committee is, I can't speak for Airdrie, but one of the things that they may have considered is that over the next 2 years or 3 years, the courts will come forward and say you have to provide areas for people to consume cannabis. They've already hinted that's coming, but once they get into the whole debate on when people start bringing class action lawsuits, or someone gets fined and decides to bring it forward and goes through the court challenges of things. So they may be being proactive and getting ahead of that, or it could have been just something in terms of finding that happy medium between people on their committee and things. But it is something that we do have to be cognitive of, is that even if we went to an all restrictive thing like Leduc, I would assume the courts will come forward and say we have to do something for people.
And I think further to that is again, like if someone's in a restaurant if they're in a bar for a bit longer, we talked about trying to encourage different types of industries in town. There are people who are going to want to go out and smoke a cigarette, so we need to be able to provide, we need to be able to provide that opportunity. But again, my stance would be, I don't think we need it in our parks or on our trails or anything like that, right? So that's kind of my starting point, and I'll be quiet and listen to everyone else because I'm very curious on where other people stand on this.
Anybody else? Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you. For me, Beaumont has always been the unique player in the region. We always develop our processes around who we are, who lives here, the age of the people that live here, population base that we have here, the logistics of how we operate our community. So I realize that we've got neighbors that are looking at doing various things, but they're also having to deal with river valleys, and public spaces, and other things that perhaps we don't have, yet we have a population base of children that are quite young, and our community is growing. And we have the fact that we are, let's go 2 miles square or maybe 4 miles square in total. There's logistics attached to that. And now we're looking to see what other models do to try to handle their first time kick at a can. For me, I would also look to Europe. I mean, they've got this in place for many, many, many years. Holland, Netherlands, and right, they have this cannabis piece in place. Why would we not go and ask, or Google up, or check, to see how they're handling that same issue with their population over all of these years? Groups around us are trying to find a starting point, and we're also starting to piggyback on their starting points. I'd like to do our own and see what physically works for us. And hearing from men that there can be challenges, legal challenges against it, perhaps there will. But the other thing too is that we've been talking about marketing. We're trying to market Beaumont. It would be nice to have a cannabis piece that speaks to the values of the community, so that you can market those values, whatever that is. If you just had carte blanche, and you could do as you wish, wherever you wish, I would think that the impact to the community from a marketing perspective would be significant. Not to mention policing perspective, not to mention the school piece and all of that, it'd be significant. So I'd like to have a look just overseas and say, hey, what have they done? And why aren't we, it baffles me at times here in North America where we don't go backwards, like go back in time, I guess, to nations that have done it, looked after it, ran it for years. And why aren't we using that style type of...
Maybe we have done it, I don't know. Mr. Hiltz, have we?
No, we didn't for this.
No? But in all of the work that AUMA and FCM did, is there nothing in there? It's kind of surprising. I'm with you, like, why haven't we?
But one of the things that through the committee chair is that we've kind of grappled with is the whole piece of cannabis and smoking, cigarette, tobacco, and how either they're tied together or they're not tied together. And that's where I think the city of Edmonton got themselves into trouble, was they tied it together. And that's when we had the pushback, because now you can't walk down the sidewalk and smoke a cigarette, where you could the week before. So, and not to say that that's a bad thing or a good thing, it's just that's what the pushback really was, it blew you up on. Where in Europe, they are definitely separate. Like in terms of what you can do. So we'll definitely look into the European models and where it is legalized, because it is becoming legal in more and more countries all the time. But yeah, that is a good point. We didn't look at it.
Just if I may, the idea of the smoke, to me, it's the effect on other people. I don't care what they do themselves, but I don't like to smell cigarette smoke either. So, I mean, that's the part that I find, yes, we have a role as council, in my mind, to protect the public enjoyment for everyone. And that's where I get hung up on this, because if people want to use it, I'm good with that. And if there's medical reasons, etc., but I don't want it to affect me if I don't want to be using it. And I hear, and I don't know, maybe you can verify this or not, can you actually get the effects from the secondhand smoke if it's significant?
Yes.
You can?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, and that's one thing.
I haven't tried that yet, so.
Your answer's supposed to be, I don't know.
Anyway, thanks for that. Yes, Councillor Van de Kerk.
For me, for tonight, I was kind of thinking about how to, went last because I hadn't collected all my thoughts yet, but looking at it in principles is kind of how I've summarized it for myself. So, if we look at the first one, we're protecting the vulnerable, as in kids. I think that everyone agrees we need to be there. 2 votes for keeping it simple. One mantra that I've used quite a bit is, if we're explaining, we're losing. So if we make something that needs to be explained all the time, then we're losing. So it needs to be a simple approach. And then the third piece, which you guys will love a lot, it's like, keep it enforceable. Like, if we're enforcing something, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it route. Let's celebrate what it is and not explain what it isn't. If we're explaining, we're losing. So that's the principles that I would like to see. Asking around and talking to people, I hear a lot of comments around model it around alcohol. You hear that. Some people say, full of public ban, I don't want it. Okay, but then your neighbor still smokes in the yard and wind goes northeast to southwest, and heaven forbid you live southwest of someone, right? And so there's going to be contact, and there's going to be complaints. We wouldn't be in a good spot if we created a bylaw that required these fellas to come here and say, we need 2 more people because of what you did. So I think we would be taking a step in the wrong direction if we created something that was complicated enough that had us have to add enforcement hours to what we do for our community. And that's what I have for tonight, I think.
Okay, Councillor Monkhouse-White.
Just to follow up on that point, and to Mr. Hiltz's point, and I'd like to hear Council's thoughts on this, about tying it together, tobacco and cannabis. To your point around simplicity, one of the reasons why I would like to see it tied together is from an enforcement perspective. I understand that we don't want to have to create more work, but I'd hate for our bylaw to have to see someone walking and smoking. Is that greenish? Is that kind of like so? That's why I think there is value in that. You talk about the principles of looking after our young kids, and Councillor Hendricks mentioned the same thing. We've also had several presentations in front of us that talk about learned behaviour from our kids, and whether it's smoking cigarettes or cannabis, to me there's no difference. And on October 17, there's certainly going to be no difference in terms of the law. So I would agree with you in terms of I don't care what you do. So it'll be interesting when we get to edibles, because that's a little different, and we're not getting there now. But I guess to put a bow on it from my perspective is a personal story. I was my oldest daughter goes to L'École des Petits. They had a field trip down to the art gallery in Edmonton, and it was good fun. We met there and they had lunch, and then by the time they wrangled 25 kids to try and sit down calmly, 2 or 3 people walked by smoking, and it just ruined the environment. And then about 20 minutes later, a gentleman, about 15 meters away, lit up a blunt, and he was smoking cannabis, and we essentially had to move. And so that really reinforced it for me that, not only is it a learned behavior thing that you don't want your kids to get into, but it's the nuisance piece, right? And again, some people may think cannabis is worse than tobacco. It's the same for me. So I would like to hear council's thoughts on tying them together. That's, like I said off the top, that's where I start, is I'd like to tie them together, but I'd be interested in other people's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Councilor Mark Swain's thoughts and some of those from council. For me, it's exactly that. It's like you can do what you want, but we should be looking at it from you're doing what you want should not be impacting me. And so I'm okay with tying the smoking in public piece together, because there are people that don't like the smell of tobacco, and there are people that don't like the smell of cannabis, and we shouldn't be forcing people to be exposed to that if we don't want to. Councilor Monkoff sort of alluded to it, though, we are going to have another hard look at this when the edibles come out, because those are generally, they don't smell. That may be more akin to walking down the street with a beer versus a hot brownie. So we'll have a look at that as it comes out. But yeah, I'm okay with tying the smoking and public piece together, just because I don't want smells wafting through the community affecting me if I wanted to.
Right. Yes.
One relevant story as well, if I could share. Unintended consequence, I think, of what's coming on October 17th. Some friends of mine have a dog, just like a lot of people in Beaumont have dogs. Walking in a town in BC, a popular town in BC. Went for a great walk, had a great day, come home, their dog wasn't okay. Problems, end up at 24-hour vet. First question that was asked of the family when they brought the dog in, boxer, 60 pounds in his arms, is, "Sir, do you smoke cannabis?" Why? "Because we see this 8 times a day." "What's that?" "Your dog has ingested marijuana." What had happened on the walk, the dog had ate probably a roach or something off the ground, and the dogs are very susceptible to this and take hard effects, so the dog was stoned. And so they have to put fluids into the dog, charcoal it, the same thing you would do with a person, to clean out the system, and then it's overnight stay. $800 later, you got your dog back and you're scared to go for a walk. So when he shared that with me, I was like, ooh, that's one of the unintended consequences of what we're doing, right? It's one thing for, to say, oh, look at that duck eat a cigarette, but it's horrible, but you see it happen. But now it's like, dogs are like, grab one and go, and then all of a sudden dogs are done, right? So we have a very avid dog community here, so there is a genuine concern for that and the disposal of things properly. And, I share that story with everybody because it's real. The family was devastated. It cost them $800 and they wondered what was going on. And it's a real problem. They see this one place sees 8 of them in a 24-hour period during high tourist times. So just to share that with everybody. It's relevant,
another
right?
enforcement issue in terms of waste and litter and things like
Disposal,
that.
yeah.
And those cigarettes are one of the biggest forms of litter.
That's right.
Any kind of cigarette.
So.
Where do we go from here? This is basically the information you were hoping for, or did you want us to be more specific at this time?
No, Madam Chair, I believe you've given us quite a bit to move forward on with respect to putting together proposed bylaw to bring back and to do a little bit more research as requested. I believe I really wish I could read your writing some days. I really do.
The same like it says.
Sure, please.
We'll get actually more input from the public as well, public meetings. That's what I wrote down for.
I saw a get.
Mr. Schwartz maybe was going to tell us the same thing, I don't know.
No, it wasn't. I was going to ask if we need to get some closure on this question by Councillor Monkoff-Swain about the tied in or not, to provide that direction, or we come back with 2 options. I'll leave that up to you.
Mr. Springer, talk a little bit about that, because we've had a lot of conversations about tying it together and enforceability, and not having them tied it together and enforceability and things like that, so put them on the spot here.
Well, and I guess the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, with Edmonton so close, and then reviewing, going forward, but then pulling back, and then now we've got to look what that big picture is. So, we're talking about, setback distances, with smoking right now, it's, if it's set back 5 meters, from a window or a doorway, that, and I think even actually in their bylaw, they put it was at 10 meters. So essentially, whether you smoke tobacco or cannabis, any street you're walking in Edmonton, you were actually in contravention. You were literally having to move off, off that public sidewalk. It really comes down to the enforceability. If we're talking about the simplicity of it, right? We're trying to, conceptually it looks great when we develop these bylaws, but it's that, how does that play when we put it into, in real life?
And that's exactly what I'm looking for is your experience in enforcing it, because like I said, that's where I start, but I'd like to get a better understanding of what that means from your perspective. Obviously we'll go to our residents and get their thoughts, But generally, I think tying them together wasn't the issue that got the city in trouble. I think the more specifics around 500 meters from this place, 1,000 meters from this place, and you had to get your, essentially get Google Maps out and draw a line and figure out whether you could smoke there or not, right? But I think so I'd be interested in your opinion, and not necessarily today, but to bring back is tying a total public ban for them, save a few spots, designated spots, say in the Swanson area if you wanted to sort of borrow that sort of thing. So that's what I was looking for. Thank you to Sierra Schwartz. I got one answer from John, and if you don't want to answer it, that's okay. I just want to make sure that people had the opportunity to say whether they thought tying it in, at least getting the report back. That's what I'm not advocating for. I'd like to see more of that information.
Is the timeline okay? I mean, at this point, you're bringing it back to this committee again, or directly to council now?
To the committee chairs. We'll need to bring it, we'll need to determine that actually. We'll see where the research takes us. What we wanted to do is in September bring forward and get the bylaw brought forward. Maybe we were going to do it as 1, 2, 3, but we made it in 2 different meetings where we'd have the first reading and see what the council's thoughts are and things like that, and we modify and change it to the second and third. And bring it to the second meeting in September. We could bring it to the September committee as a whole, but then we'd have to move very, very quickly after that one. It does become a timing issue, but we'll see what we find in terms of when we go through all of this, what it kind of looks like.
Sorry to step up. Is there an option for the upcoming open houses to ask that question of residents?
Which question?
To tie them together.
We can ask them pretty much anything.
Okay. I just like, that's what I'm trying to get to. It's certainly not my position. It's just where I start, and I'd like to hear some feedback from certainly the experts, but also our residents and what they think. So I don't know how you ask the questions, but I just wondered if there was flexibility to change the content of the questions, or if we're going to do another survey type thing. If we have that flexibility, I'd like to see that question just asked. And it doesn't mean we're going there, but I'd like to see it asked. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the rest of it when it comes back. We have one more item, I think, unless I missed something. Council grants and donation funding. Mr. Harris is here somewhere. Mr. Harris.
Let's go.
And it says 45 minutes. I don't know.
You got 20. Just kidding.
Let's go 5.
It's entirely up to you.
Who's betting? Oh, I won't say that out loud.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Ms. Chair, Chairperson.
Welcome.
Is it chairperson, chairwoman, chair?
It's
Chair.
chairperson. Chair.
Chair makes sense, and you don't have to genderize it. Yeah. Simple.
Thank you very much. So what you have before you is a menu to assist in developing a grants policy. Grants policies are dependent on the community and how you would like to see things move forward. I've provided our existing grant policy, the amount of money that we currently spend on grants, which includes the Blues Roots and Blues, or Blues and Roots, the amount that we've provided to the Art Society and so forth this year, which was a one-time grant, and we'll go into next year. So what I'm looking for from the committee is, and I have a really small version of the different options, and I try to present it as a menu based on review of a number of policies. This could be as long as you want, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to have a look at what's here, and then you may want to create your own. You may agree with some of the items, you may not. So if we could walk through each of the, I guess, the 5 areas.
We're talking about this last...
Yes, the very last page, yes. The most important thing is where do you want to go for funding? I believe that in all my experience with grants and so forth, is that local governments set a percentage of their budget to go towards grants, and they work from there. So currently, we do about 0.88%, a total of $161,000. And like I said, it includes the Roots and Blues, the Arts Society, some fundraising, grants for to assist in sports and so forth. So I guess 1% would bring that number to 183, 1.5 to 274, and 2% to 366. Realizing that anything above basically the 1%, which would have a small increase, would be a tax increase. I mean, to find $22,000, we could make that work to go bring it up to 1% without having a major impact to the budget. But where does council want to go with this?
Okay.
I think that's the starting point you have to start with, and then it determines everything else.
And if I may just ask, I'm asking a question about the purpose of the existing policy we have in front of us. That's not really the purpose of why we give the grants. It's the purpose of the policy. Right? It's the policy. It says the purpose of the policy is set guidelines for dealing with requests.
Yeah.
But higher level purpose in terms of why do we give grants out in the first place?
Well, that's
for me where like I start.
That's column 3.
You know, and I'm starting at like, and for me it's about building community or promoting volunteerism. It's those kinds of words. And I guess my other question would be to you is, and maybe Mr. Hiltz as well. Are we turning people away, or is that budget what we need in our community this size? Do you have any scope and scale, or is that just what we had left and this is how we gave it out? You know, like we're starting from a place of how to give out a pot of money instead of starting at a place of what's the outcome we're trying to achieve.
Well, the outcome, if you're trying to, and so I will take my finance hat off.
Yeah.
You can make this 10% and you still won't achieve what you want to achieve.
Granted, you can give away everything, but in terms of what we want to achieve, how close are we? I mean, would more people come if we told them it was here? Do we keep it a secret? I kind of think we keep it a secret a little bit because people
by the fact that this is televised or whatever, it's not a secret. It's secret.
Not secrets anymore. I know.
The question, and this is, you're right, but the philosophy is, are you here to help a group to start, or are you here to fund a group forever? And I'll give you the example of the Blues Fest. Are you here to support the group for the first 3 years to get it off the ground and then use that money to help another group elsewhere? Right now, the Blues Fest started at, I think, $18,000, and it's at $50,000 at one time. 1 year it was $83,000.
I agree in that principle for sure.
And that's the reason, it's moved towards its own self-sustaining committee, theoretically. But they still come back for a grant, and they've asked for an extra $50,000 to bring it to $100,000. And that's where this is not an easy process to do. You have to set guidelines, and then you have to live by that guidelines, noting that council can always go over and find money somewhere else to pay for something. But if you want to be fair throughout the community, you have to set a group of guidelines. And you look at the Art Society, we set, I think they asked for 65, we gave them 45, and that was only for 1 year, and they're going to be coming back for probably the $65,000 again. Or I don't know, Kerry's shaking his. I'm just saying, I've seen it in the past.
Well, you answered my question, so let's let councillors or Mr. Hiltz, do you want to add to that?
Well, there's two different streams here. There's the one stream where the community groups and individuals and things come forward to council and they ask for money for an event or to assist them.
A one-off
kind of thing. Or we have some of the ongoing ones in Blues and Roots or the Arts Society or the Ag Society, etc. We're kind of coming back on a yearly basis for their funding. We also have the grants, donations, and funding policy that's administered through the recreation component in my department, Council Policy R15. This is wrought with problems because what's happened is, let's take, for example, Ringette. So Ringette has figured out that they send 5 teams to provincials. So there's $13,000 there in total money for the grant. So each team gets 600. Plus, individuals can apply for funding as well, up to $400 in the provincials. And so it's not what its intended purpose. And so we run out of money by extension. So that one this one needs review as well in terms of its forward, where it's going to go in terms of this whole grantee discussion as well.
Let's hear from a couple of councillors as well.
Just on a process question, I personally really liked how it was laid out in the 5 groups, and I think the order makes sense. I think the third column where we talk about who should we give it to, when should we give it to, how, I think we'll get that. But I do like the idea of let's get an idea around funding, and then we'll move to assistance, and what do we do then? Because I think that when I read it, it naturally flowed for me. So I know you might have a couple of clarifying questions, but I think if we went, that'd be a good way to go about this. Deal column by column.
Okay. Councillor.
I think going through it that way would be cool and good. We can do that. One comment I wanted to make is echoes your concern around purpose. I had kind of put, do we need to better define the purpose? So kind of 2 votes to that, but okay with the conversation guiding. I really like what you said. Are we here to help a group start and get going? I added to support one-time asks or to ensure it survives in perpetuity. I think that's kind of a good frame of reference as we work through this. What's that?
That's column 2.
Yeah. And then the process. So when groups randomly came to council and asked for money, and I said and thought, we need to better define how this works. When I closed my eyes and thought about it, I thought of a process-based system where it's guided by a policy, and the process is something like this. There's 1% of money, which is this much, whatever, I like round numbers, so 1%, whatever. And you have to make a case for why you need it. And so you put an application in and you explain it, and there's some kind of vetting process that happens, and then the money is allocated or not to those groups in the order which they're received, whatever, and when it's gone, it's gone. And it keeps those discussions outside of council chambers. It has them policy-based, process-driven. Council has its input on how much is going to go. So when I closed my eyes and thought about it, that's what I envisioned, and I couldn't grasp that this was that, but I just wanted to get I've been thinking about that for as long as I've said no to, in my mind, to one-off asks from random people coming to council. So that's...
If I could just, before I go to Councillor Henderson, just one thought on that. We don't have to reinvent this wheel. And I know that you know that. There's many cities and municipalities that already do this, and they have criteria, and they have ways of delineating it, etc. And I think we've grown up to that point now where we need to make it so that everybody won't get it, but there's a process that's fair, and at the end of the day the money runs out, but we did it in a fair way, and these folks got it and this group got it. I also wonder if we shouldn't be allocating it not just one big pot. We break it into, if we're looking at sports and recreation and the arts and social needs or whatever else, there might be at different times in our evolution, we might need more money for this versus money for that. So, having different amounts in those different pots might be another way to consider going. I'll stop there. Councillor Hendricks, you had a question?
Yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel, but I think it's perhaps, given the administration's had to work with it since 2007, that they can make it more robust.
Yeah, we need to review this for sure.
And tighten up the loopholes. But the other thing that's happened since I've been on council is that despite policies, and we've tried to put policies in place to keep people from coming to council, they still come. They still come in front, they still sit, they still ask, and they say, well, I was told by the administration there's no more money. However, we just got this event, we just got this opportunity, we just got, and then council still has a decision. Even if it's a non-registered presentation, they come and they ask, and that's always a part of the game, right? But I would say send this back given the experience that you've had to date, where we need to tighten it up. But after that, we'll still deal with one-offs as they come in.
Mr. Harsher?
Yeah, through the chair. That's nice. I can come up with a policy, but you're not going to like the policy that I'm going to come up with, because it's a financial one. I think we still need to go through this. Yeah. So don't say throw it back to the finance guy, because I can be as cheap as the next guy. Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, so, Mayor,
I'm ready to go through the fives.
you want to go through each column and pick our options that we like the best?
Yeah, and then give them some feedback, and then they can develop the policy from the feedback that we get.
So you want to start with funding, or start on the left, or you want to start on the other side?
No, let's start with funding, because I think we should be looking, I know you mentioned about different pots, but I think we should set the overall funding envelope and keep it simple for the first year or two. I like round numbers. I'd stick with 1% for now and go with that, so let's see what
Which would be the one,
rest of council
the
is.
very small print here, but that would be 183?
183, yeah, currently. Second part for that. Very cool.
I think it's a good starting point, so.
That would change up or down to percent.
Yeah, that'll increase every year.
Yeah, the 1% is what we're approving.
1% of the previous year.
Yes.
Of the previous year's
The
total
previous year's total taxes.
And
So
if we hit budget committee and we find
Yeah,
that
this is
1%
based on
$1 million
taxes.
bucks, and we decide, oh, that's too much, we can knock it back to 0.5%. That's our.
So everybody understand
But
what
right
it is?
now,
1% of total tax.
yeah, it's 1% of tax. This is based on taxes.
Tax that was collected,
Yes, it would be the previous year. So that's where the 183 is. The municipal tax this year was about 183. So that's where the or $18.3 million. So
I've seen it 1% of budget, I've never seen it like that, but anyway, okay.
Regardless of where we finally end up, we will communicate that before, prior to that year's submission, the dollar amount.
It'll be in the
People
budget.
are they're going to see moving target, and they're not sure why. So
1% of the budget would be about $490,000.
We'd have a built community in no time.
Jeez, we have a lot of.
The taxes would be pretty high.
A lot of new councilors, 3%.
Yeah, we'd have a new council and everything. Okay, so 1%.
That might be the.
We're not voting, but we're giving you a sense of.
Yes, thank you.
So next column then, anybody want to weigh in on which option they prefer on this one? This is the, basically, the town does not sponsor, it's very small print, so excuse me for.
Basically, the first option is that the town sponsor no more than 50%, with either no maximum or a $50,000 maximum or a $25,000. Why the $50,000 maximum is there? Because of the Blues Fest. The other one is, it's a tiered. You would give 50% in the first year, 25% in the second year, and 12.5%. So you weed them off over 3 years if it's like an event like the Blues Fest or someone else, so that they function on their own. Or you can do whatever, come up with another consideration.
Mayor's got an idea?
Yeah, well, this is where it sort of breaks into two for me. We should actually have two application streams, one for ongoing continuous funding, and we should set a number of years that you can apply for, and one time only. So things like Edinburgh, when they come and say we're going to Edinburgh, it's a one-time event, please give us funding. So there should be an application stream for that, and our pot of money should be sort of broken down into long-term or for continuous. And
Can I mention something just on that? It can be a difference between and I know in the parlance of finance guys, grants means something very specific versus a contribution or a donation. Like it might even be like a different kind of a policy that you're doing. Like that's where it does break down for me as well.
My preference is to have it all within this policy. If you want to call a grant a sponsorship, a one-time grant or sponsorship,
or something.
Whatever word you use, you
I
would
know
have
maybe
that.
it could be one
two funding.
policy, but I don't think it's a grant as much as it's a contribution.
Sponsorship, yeah. So you'd have a one-time versus an ongoing. So on that ongoing, how do you want to do the ongoing?
so yeah, in my opinion, the ongoing should be capped at a certain number of years, and then you have to take some time off. And then the one-times, they get dealt with on a one-off basis as they come in. And so we've had to sort of discuss, and I'm interested to hear some thoughts of council on how much that should be and what you're thinking.
That's my, we should have 2 funding streams, one for one-offs and one for things like the Blues and Roots and Arts Fest and things.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll pony off that a little bit. I think that's a good idea. One of the things we might want to also consider on the ongoing stuff is you can't increase, or the maximum percentage increase year over year. As in, if you got $10,000 one year and then it's like $50,000 the next year. Like maybe we want to consider capping how much these increases can go up as well. I don't know how we would do that or what it might look like, but.
So in that one, so are you saying that somebody will always get it and it'll always go on forever? You might as well put that in as a service and do a contract and not do it under your grant policy? Or are you going to say that the grant is here to give you seed money over 3 years? But if you're looking at something that's going to continue with inflation, take it out of this policy and just run it. And that's what it is. It's a contract. You're going to provide this service until eternity. So that wouldn't fall, in my opinion, that wouldn't fall in this.
That's what I'm saying, there's differences here.
Yeah. No, that's not where I was going. It was like, whatever, what did you say, 3 years or 5 years?
Yeah,
whatever.
3 years.
Whatever your term is, 3-year term, and your increase year over year can't be any more than X% of what your initial was. Look, one of the worries that I have is that someone comes and asks for $5,000 and then the next year they ask for 45. And then we arbitrarily have to figure out, is it 5 or is it 15 or is it 20 or is it 25?
Well, the other thing you could do with that would be that if we're going to give, I'm going to use 3-year funding. If we give 3-year funding as an example, then if they come and ask for $10,000, they have to ask what they want for the next 3 years. Can't.
So you're saying a 3-year
if it's
proposal
3 years.
or whatever?
Yeah, you got to give a 3-year proposal.
Maybe
You can't
we're getting
come
in
back
the
and-
weeds a little?
Well, we are, but that's what the whole point of this is.
So, yeah, I'm just
Councilor
figure out
Hendrickson,
year over year,
Figure out
cap year over year increases, I guess. Yeah.
My
Councilor-
concern would be, with everything I've seen, is that there's a case study for just about everything, business case study otherwise. If you decide that there's now this process whereby something has finally got some momentum and starting to build in the community and we need more money and all of a sudden it's turning into a huge event and all the rest, and by the way, time's up, you're done, and we clip them and then they go away. We got to be careful with that. Right? I'm seeing like the Blues Fest as an example it came out of the motions committee, right? And it evolved over time, and then it was just discussed that well maybe they should have their own nonprofit group, so that they can handle themselves, and then we wouldn't have to micromanage the money, and it went on and on and on. So now here they are, and now I'm hearing just the other day at a meeting where why are we providing fireworks for the Blues Fest? No, it's our fireworks. It's our Blues Fest. Like it hasn't gone away.
Sponsorship.
So, it's becoming an important piece of the summer here. So once these groups that are all nonprofits are doing their thing, if you take where the promotions committee started and where they've gone with all the various events, if they apply that same fundamental to that set of rules, they don't exist today. So I'm just...
It's back to what something Catherine was trying, it's an ongoing service to run festivals in our community.
But then you'd have to have an MBA to try to figure out which ones.
Well, maybe we decide now which ones
And
are.
so, and there's, sorry.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I just
It's
said...
okay, everybody's getting animated.
You've now got the Tour de Alberta here. They've come, they needed dollars.
It's not a festival in my mind, but anyway.
Then keep it simple and everybody applies every year.
I think we can simplify it a little bit more. Mr. Hill?
One of the chairs, one of the things that the opponents of the grant that I think is very important to consider is, does the group, if they're applying for long-term planning, like 3, 5, 10 years, or whatever it's going to be, if they are contributing to that event, that's a very valuable thing. So the Blues Fest probably comes in around 50% is what our funding contributes to their event. Somewhere in there, maybe 40 to 50%. They are doing something. We're trying to work with the Beaumont Society of the Arts, so they're not doing any more right now. We pay 100% of their event. events. So they're-
I mean, the work that goes into putting on the event.
Yeah, so we're paying, yeah, well, there's the volunteer time, but I meant in terms of the cost of the productions and what they pay for the rentals and everything else. We're pretty much funding 100% of those costs and things like that. But there comes a time, when do you make that cutoff with what's in our society, for example? Like, would you say that in 3 years, do you want them to start to put into that event, or are we always going to provide at that level? And so that's just another kind of a part of that thought process that you have to do.
What's your return on the investment of that?
Yeah, like, you know, might have a great return on investment, but because that money, it's preventing other groups from establishing too, or other opportunities from establishing. There's just stuff to think about. Like, I'm not picking on the arts in any sense of the matter, but it's just, that's one of those balancing acts that you have to really be thinking of.
Who's next? Councillor Sam?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance before, so I want to piggyback on what Councillor Van Newkirk mentioned, and I think we're all in agreement there that we don't like when it's not great policy or governance when someone comes in and says, give us X, and then we're debating up here, and I'll use the arts, they asked for 65, and we were coming umming and ahhing, and a good friend, Councillor Stout, was doing some math on the fly, and we kind of awkwardly get there. Or, you know, when we talked about the arts festival, they got 50 in, and they asked for another 25 here. It was a council 3-3 split, and so they didn't, like, that's just, to me, that's awkward. So I want to be able to pull us out of those conversations. I fully get what you mean by people are going to come, but if we can, as much putting it back. But where I want to go on this is to look at the second column. And you've got groups participating in provincial, national, international activities and then the next one is groups participating hosting activities. For me, the way I voted on this and will continue to vote on this is, what is the value to our residents? What is the value for Beaumont? This is taxpayer dollars. I always vote no. If someone is going overseas to something, and this is just my personal belief, I don't think that should be funded by taxpayer dollars. No matter what you're doing, how great the group is, or how important the trip is, if you're providing an event or an opportunity within the community that other community members can participate in, then I'm more comfortable with it, because that is taxpayer dollars going towards something for the community. So I'll juxtapose a trip going to Quebec. No, I don't think taxpayer should be funding a group of school kids, although it's a great trip. I don't think we should be funding them to go to Quebec. But if we're hosting the Real Roots Fair, that brings people into our community and that floods in community members and other people in there. So that's where I draw the line on terms of value into Beaumont. So I'd be interested in that discussion. So I lose the vote every time in council, so I assume not everyone's on the same page as me. But I'd like to reposition that. I'd like maybe at least to get your sense on why you think there is value in taxpayer dollars paying for someone to go on an overseas trip, or yeah. So that's my point I wanted to make on that column.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, if I may, through the chair. In regards to that's the current policy and practice, and those are the numbers that are there. If you've kind of jumped to the next column where it talks about exactly what, you know, the general exposure and profile, that's where you would be saying, you know, does this meet this requirement? So we'd fund. Going overseas doesn't do anything. The question becomes is, in regards to the amount that you're going to provide for funding, is ignore what's being put on per se and just say from a philosophy, from a dollar value, that you're not going to sponsor more than 50% of any one thing. You have to come up with 50%, similar to the Roots and Blues. Or is it you'll sponsor up to 75%? And the next one is, that's the maximum that you're going to fund anyone. It's not 200, 300. You look at the number within your $181,000, $183,000, and then you say, okay, that's the maximum you can go. Now let's look at, do you meet the funding requirements, as opposed to each individual gets 400, a group gets 1,000, so you combine it. So you look at what's the maximum you're going to give for that event, so that if Ringat, using Ringat as an example, is going to provincials, the maximum that are you going to fund for those provincials is 50%. It's not each individual, it's the maximum that you're going to give to that group going. Then you would say, okay, the maximum we're going to give you is this. That's the maximum you can get, but do you meet our requirements, which is the next one, right? So what is the maximum you're willing to give somebody? Will you give them 100%?
My answer is it depends on what need you're trying to meet. But anyway, let me
Yeah,
hear
no,
Councillor.
that's fair.
I can't do it across the board. I can't. I've worked with too many groups of different kinds needing different amounts.
Yep.
Councillor Hendricks.
So thank you. So part of the unintended consequences that I've seen in the past is a group says, I want to go overseas. I'm from Beaumont. If Council in Beaumont says, no, we won't get any funding. However, they do get funding from Leduc County, or the city of Leduc, and they have on their documents that they're handing out, where you're from Beaumont, but our sponsorship titles don't have Beaumont attached to it. It's tough, right? And we've had that even right in our town, where there's an event that took place, and I was going through the brochure figuring we had help with the sponsorship. No, Leduc County was everybody in the region, but not Beaumont.
That's sponsorship.
So that can be a problem. I know with the school piece, they travel. It's more like an exchange arrangement, and they provide the feedback on where they come from. They bring the Beaumont discussion to those regions, and then those who have provided dollars, including a lot of the businesses, have been noted. If Beaumont hasn't provided dollars, they're not voted. It looks awkward. It really does. So I think we got to be careful about unintended consequences. How that plays out. Because I've sat in a room where in our community, and it was right in our church where they had that organist piece, right? All these organists from all over playing, but Beaumont was not part of the sponsorship team. Right?
To me, it's not grants, that's sponsorship. And I think that's a different policy. And I know you want to put them all together, but I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, so and I agree. If we're doing something in our community that benefits the community, great. But for someone to go to Edinburgh, and if they're not sponsored by Beaumont, personally I couldn't place. I'd rather use that money to promote in Beaumont, within Beaumont. That's the general principle.
You were asking for some comments. Yeah. Could I just give you my thoughts on that one? So when, whether it's children or adults who win awards or prizes or can do something that showcases what they've done in another country and does bring Canada or Beaumont or Alberta to another country, to me that is a valuable asset that shows on our community. Edinburgh Festival is a group going over there from here, from Beaumont, Alberta. They won the ability to go there. They won it by applying and saying, here's what we're going to do. It showcases what we're capable of doing. I mean, I think that has benefit. I don't think it's the same as an organization and for the same purposes. I see it as promoting the benefits here. So it fits for me. It definitely fits for me, but to me it's not the same as a grant to an organization. It's a different thing. Who else? Well, this is not an easy one, Mr. Harris.
This policy is not an easy policy.
It's never been an easy one anywhere. Do you want to weigh into this at this point?
I do, and I probably shouldn't, and I'm probably going to regret this. But you talked about, Councillor Hendrick talks about not reinventing the wheel, and there's communities out there that are doing this fairly well. And a program that I'm familiar with is a community grant program, and it has 3 sets of criteria or purpose. And it provides funds for one-time projects or initiatives. So if somebody comes up with a safety project or something for our town, that's something we can consider. It'll fund operating expenses of a nonprofit organization in their development stages once per fiscal year, because this program has 2 intakes, for up to 3 years within the first 5 years of their existence. The last one is events that are primarily designed and delivered for the general public that attract visitors, significantly contribute to the local economy, and promote volunteerism. Now, how the selection is done, it's a fairly detailed process, but it comes to a committee who then decides. And they have 2, 4, 6, 7 sets of criteria that the committee agrees on, that it's on a point system. So they'll look at the needs assessment, the analysis, the planned evaluation with measurable targets of their plan, and they give them up to 20 points. They'll look at cost-benefit value, and they'll agree on up to 20 points. And it slides down to, credible previous management of the project, and gives them up to 5 points. What was the one that someone talked about? Demonstration of a thorough project plan, number of people impacted, and how. So the point is, it's a program that has fairly liberal ability to apply, has debatable criteria, and then there's also reporting that's required afterwards, and there's 2 intakes per year. How it works, and then the final stage is they bring that recommendation to council. And the recommendation of all the intakes and how they scored them, and then council makes the final decision. How I've seen it on play is, one, it gets the community involved because they're making the voting on these points. 2, it puts some emphasis on the group, and Alan talked about 50% funding. This was, matching funding was points. If you didn't match funding, you got 0 points. But if you did, you could get up to 20 points. So it encouraged you to do that. It had a maximum, you could only give up to $10,000 per year, but that probably doesn't apply here. But it still brought it back to council and allowed council to debate it and allowed council to make the decision. And inevitably, it worked out really well. Typically, they would have the top 10, and one or two would change places. Somebody that wasn't getting funding would get funding because council debated it and voted on it. And it's just a system that worked really well.
Sounds quite familiar.
Yeah, so it's easier where one as well. So maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe we come out with something that somebody else is doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's steal somebody's policy that's similar to that.
Well, and I know that's the work
And you can fine-tune it to fit our situation. It's just that
Well, through the committee, I did have a policy written up, but then it would be, and it was kind of working similar to stuff like that, not exactly in regards to what Mike had indicated, but it could be in the evaluation criteria, it could be in there, but that would be remiss of me to do a policy and say this is what it is, and then council say we want to look at options. So this is what the idea is.
No,
we can come with a policy similar to that, and I know which policies he's talking about, kind of deal, because I've read the same policy, and bring it forward to council and see where you go. It still has basically two streamings, maximum 3 years, that you can get something out of 5 years. You may not get it in the second year, you may get it in the third year, because you can rotate, kind of a deal. It comes to council for a decision, and ultimately it's council's decision, but it still doesn't stop anyone from coming in asking for more.
Councillor Van Nieuwkerk.
I was sitting on one comment, and I think there's a fit for it in terms of what was just shared, is I grew up working for what I got and putting in time, and I'd like to see some of that. Maybe in this point scheme you get points for community improvement, as in we went out or community volunteering, a promotions committee needs help or whatever. Something. What are you doing to give back to the community to receive from the community? Like and put 40 points to that or something. Like you said, you can skew the level of effort in different ways. But if we're going to come back with an idea like that, maybe we can incorporate a thought like that. I would suggest.
Because there's some groups out there that don't have a lot of money, but they put a lot of volunteer hours in, and there's value in that.
There is, yeah, and that's the give back to the community piece that might be missing sometimes. In why should we do this? What have they done for the community? Well, they do all these great things, but also we've put in 450 people hours of volunteering to do this. Well, that's great. But look at the effort. Look how hard they're working for this too. So.
Councillor, one of your points about what we already have going and some of the things that have grown up with us. I think we have to build some grandparenting, something into, like, we just can't now tell groups your funding's going to end next year.
I think you're wrong. I think you tell them they have to apply.
3 years? Well, I don't think it can be. I mean, it'd be it would be devastating to the community if something that they were expecting to happen isn't going to happen next year because we've given them the bad news and they're going to be gone. I think you have to give them a reasonable time.
Well, you have to make them apply, and then and as long as the decision rests with council, that's a political thing that we can discuss at council level. And
Again, I know what you're talking about.
Well, and it could be any committee. Sometimes small amounts of money mean an awful lot more to groups than big amounts of money, because that's all they get, or that's all they have, except for volunteers. I just think through that, because there could be some that get caught in the squeeze, unintended consequences of some.
Yeah, I completely agree. These events take a long time to put on, and if we're waiting till budget, and we need to make sure there's enough time for that so that they can plan these events. And I certainly not a fan of just rolling over X amount every year. I think we're all talking the same thing, but we can't just arbitrarily just cut it.
Somehow a process of some kind to give them enough time to.
But we need to start the conversation.
You go first. Sorry, I was going to say too that on the narrative, whatever it is, we have to provide surety, with whatever we're doing. I mean, when we decided to review these,
I'm thinking of the Midway.
Yeah, well,
I know that's our event. That's our event, but it could be a similar thing.
But even the promotions committee just sort of, was wondering what is going on. Are we still, are we viable? Are we still in? Or what's going on? Right? And Mr. Ellis did an excellent job putting the letter together, calm that down. But it did shake it up. And we're still in the, well, what are we doing phase? And so we're waiting for council's decision on promotions committee. And you can see the numbers that we have now. So it's and we haven't really done anything. All we've done is tease the idea. Well, so hence the problem.
Because I see the promotions committee coming over, but I don't know how that would happen, because what the intention was is to review council's participation, not whether or not the work they were doing was valuable and viable. Because all these committees are doing valuable and viable work, and it needs to continue whether or not a council member is on the committee or not. And so, I don't know how.
You're kind of back to another item, are you?
I did, because you brought
from an agenda perspective.
Through the chair, very interesting conversation on committees, but we could be, and I hate to be the bad guy like Mike says and step in. It's a good conversation to have, but I think right now what we're trying to do is look at the funding side. I think in regards to the concern about the timing and allowing everything, is that if everyone's comfortable with the point system, and we can come back with the point system, that's the number on number 3. Number 2 is in regards to having two times coming in. So a submission for those groups that have need the money right away, like Blues Fest, is they submit by December 15th, kind of a deal. The budget's effectively been passed, should have been passed by then. And then, so they've got those in, and a decision. So those timelines, if you're okay with the timelines, there are different ones. We can come back with two dates, or 3 dates, something for you guys to chew on. And then I think the next thing is, and where we're getting into a really healthy debate with the reasons for committees or whatever, maybe, is in the last one is in regards to council, provided maybe the promotions committee is the one who decides on where it goes, or you set up a different committee to come up with the recommendations that come forward for these events, and then council votes on them, as opposed to coming to staff making the decision and then council doing it. Put it out to the community, be it the promotions committee, maybe that's a good role for them, because events are involved in that and they can see, or it's a totally separate, no council involvement. It's important, and then it comes back for council to make the decision. So you may want to have people from the Art Society, from the Promotions Committee, from the Recreation Committee that's already out there, them coming in, one from each one of those committees to make a decision. They go back to their groups, they have an idea, or something like that. I don't know, I'm throwing ideas out there in regards to how do you make that committee go, and the committees that are concerned about, do they provide worth to the community or to council? Here's a good way of getting them involved. Like members from each one, be it from the seniors group, one from, there is a recreation committee out there right now, which doesn't have council, one of their members. And then you bring them.
That's where, if we're going to do the peer review, or the community review, you've got to mix it up, unless you're going to separate the pots. If you're going to separate the pots and have a sports pot and a social pot and a different pot,
Well, that's what it's
then you
open
have
here.
different people. But if you're going to put it all into one, then you got to mix up the representation. Otherwise, you get all of the soccer people wanting, the money goes there. I mean, it just happens because it's natural.
Yeah, the committee member or the mayor indicated, earlier in regards to starting it out the first 3 years, get a feel of where this is going, and if we have to break it up into different pots, maybe that's when we break it up, or do you want to break it up into the different pots now?
But it is tied up in the committee discussions.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe we have to have that one as part of the whole policy, or,
And that's what I'm saying, is we can come back with, here's a recommendation of what this committee could look like. And this is where, like Councillor Hendricks was saying, is in regards to committees are wondering what are their value with everything that's going on. Well, maybe this committee or council can throw it back and say, yes, we see what you do out in the community. We don't have to be on your committee, right, kind of per se. Some maybe not. If there's a governance, sure. But here you go, it comes back to council and you're playing an important role.
it's very important to ask them for input to that decision. If you're going to take an existing committee and say, here, we want you to do this now. Before you do that, you need to say, we're thinking of maybe, would you like, what's your opinion about? That'll go further than.
Well, true. Or
made a
you ask
decision
each of
and
the
you're
committee,
in.
do you want to put somebody on? So that's what I'm saying, is to have those discussions. Whether it's the promotion committee or a member from the promotions committee that represents the promotions committee, or somebody from the seniors who's representing the seniors, and they go from there.
But you'll bring back more, when?
Well, the intent was to bring back something for the next council meeting, but what I'll do is, we don't have a council meeting, the first one in August, right? The last meeting in
We
August.
have one in August, right?
Yeah. Last meeting in August. The intent would be to bring it to
because I'm missing the next one, and I'd really like to be there.
We'll bring it to a regular.
a regular council meeting. Yeah.
Then we have to go back, we'll go back.
Is that okay? I mean, we need to get this done, but we want to do it right.
Yeah, we need to get it done before the next budget cycle that's coming up, and that's important. We set the dollar value, and then it's that intake of the groups to provide some consistency or normality to those groups who may eventually be cut off or may not be cut off.
Yep, absolutely. Mr. Hills?
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to kind of reaffirm something that the mayor indicated, was that having the groups apply. When I was in my last community, we started out with it was 3 groups on the grandfathered list. And when I left that community, I think there was 16 on the list, and they were using up all the money, didn't know else to apply because they felt that's not fair.
The political, it's the political.
And so, and basically you have to be very careful with that, because all of a sudden it could creep. Like you might say, if we lose and lose to the only one, but probably in 5 years there's going to be a few more on there and a few more. You just have to be
People
really
know they
careful.
can get on a list.
Yeah, because then they don't have to apply. So I when we bring the policy forward, we may bring that is our criteria. I think something we got to think about. That can be changed, but it's just something that will make this process easier.
One last question to the committee. Is there thought, and I know it's a new majority new council kind of deal, has there been talk about setting up a foundation within Beaumont to, for either development or I've seen it in smaller communities. I mean, you're competing against Edmonton, but establishing a foundation that does work. And where this is coming from, when I lived in Salmon Arm, it was the Shoe Shop Foundation that did all the grant applications for the city of Salmon Arm.
Like a United Way.
Well, not in United. It was a
Like a United Way.
No, they're not a United Way. No, it's foundations that gave out grants plus they got money, kind of a deal. So they were a foundation that did their own stuff, but then they also handled all the grants for the city.
I know, I'm sorry.
You leverage more money, yeah.
So basically what we would do.
Yeah.
My initial reaction to your question would be, let's get this sorted first, and then maybe next year.
Okay.
That's just my personal opinion.
Is that your 5th column when you're talking about someone else to do the work?
That's the last column.
I wasn't there yet either, so I don't think I'm not there.
I'm in favor of the committee and then bring it to council for decision.
Yeah, me too. Maybe let's walk first and then we'll run later. Okay? All right, I think there's no other items on the agenda unless someone thinks there's an in-camera or anything like that. No, then I will say we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. 9:30.
Early breakfast.
I had a very good chuckle at that.
It wasn't too far off.